Some memories stay vivid no matter how many decades pass, like the weight of a spear at 25 heading into his first real battle and having to take a life. Fresh blood starts to pool on the parched ground. 2,000 enemies later, he's the only one left alive on this field. His armor is caked in grime and gore. This is the moment everything finally gives out and he collapses. But then the scene shifts. He's 13 again. Caught in a meeting about his parents' inheritance between a nervous official and his greedy uncle. The inheritance official slides the papers over with a fake smile, asking for a signature. Damien looks at the contract, his eyes way too sharp for a child his age. The official tells him not to worry about the details, just sign and it's done. His uncle leans forward with a condescending grin, promising to hold on to the money until Damien is an adult. In his first life, this was the day everything fell apart, but not this time. He starts ripping the documents to pieces, demanding the funds stay in his own name. Scraps of paper flutter through the air as the uncle watches in pure shock. Damien is taking control now, setting new terms that no one in the room expected. He wants it locked in an account he alone can access with zero chance of withdrawal by anyone else. The uncle's face twists, his fist clenching tight until it shakes. The guy loses it, lunging across the table to grab Damien by the collar and scream in his face. He told him he was just a snot-nosed kid who didn't know anything, so he had no business holding onto that fortune. The boy just smirks. He's almost glad the man is exactly the piece of garbage he remembered. A solid punch lands right on the uncle's jaw, silencing the shouting. The man goes down hard. Damien doesn't even flinch as he calls him out for what he is. He turns his attention to the official, who is suddenly very cooperative. The man starts scribbling down the special provisions as fast as his trembling hands will allow. Ordinarily, a 13-year-old would be at their mercy, but this kid has the soul of a veteran who's already lived a full, brutal life. Back on the battlefield, the moon shines down on a valley of corpses. Centurion Damien stands alone, leaning on his spear as the silence of the dead settles in. Every step he takes is heavy, his boots dragging through the blood-soaked dirt. He realized long ago that this operation was a reckless suicide mission. As a centurion of the Baroque kingdom, he had a duty to see it through, even against impossible odds. A ragged, blood-choked breath escapes his lungs. His vision starts to fail him, everything blurring through the slits of his helmet. He finds one of his own men lying in the dust, eyes wide and empty. With trembling fingers, he reaches out to finally let his comrade rest in peace. The weight of it all hits him, and he sinks to his knees among the fallen. He slams a fist into the ground, cursing the fact that he wasn't strong enough to save them. Dark blood continues to seep through the gaps in his armor. His strength is gone. He stumbles one last time, his vision darkening. The helmet falls from his head and rolls away across the stones. He slumps back against the bodies of his friends, staring up at the cold night sky. As he watches the moon, he wonders if things would have been different if he'd started his journey just a few years sooner. Just once, if he's given just one more chance, he'd do it all differently. He could have truly conquered the battlefield with the comrades he lost, but reality is cruel, and his vision starts to fade as his life slips away. He was certain he'd drawn his final breath until a sudden light changes everything. He wakes up clutching a bed sheet, his heart hammering against his ribs. This isn't the afterlife. He's back in his childhood bedroom, 17 years in the past. He stares at his hands, small and free from the calluses of 1,000 battles. He immediately checks his lower abdomen, searching for the source of a warrior's strength. In his first life, his mono core was irreparably damaged. This time, it's perfectly intact. This changes the entire trajectory of his future. Last time, his life was ruined the moment his inheritance was stolen. He spent his youth as a street rat, eventually being framed for a crime and thrown into prison. From a cold cell, he was forcibly conscripted and sent to the front lines as cannon fodder. He was nothing more than an orphan destined for a miserable, forgotten end. Yet somehow he managed to survive and climb the ranks to become a centurion. Looking back, it's a miracle he made it as far as he did. But the brutal years of experience he gained, that's what he's brought back with him. A floorboard cax outside. His veteran instincts instantly tell him he's not alone. Without making a sound, he reaches under his pillow and grips a hidden dagger. A gloved hand slowly turns the doorknob from the outside. The door swings open and a shadow slips into the room. Before the intruder can even draw a weapon, Damien lunges from the bed like a coiled spring. The blade finds its mark, but the boy's small frame lacks the reach he's used to. He's annoyed. In his old body, that would have been a killing blow. The other masked men realize the target is fighting back and rush in to finish the job. Damien moves with a fluid grace that completely baffles the professional killers. One of them lunges forward with a scream, swinging his blade wildly. That was a cheap amateur move that Damien easily dodged with a simple bend of his body. He slips under the man's guard and lands a precise lethal counter-strike. He stands in the center of the room covered in their blood, looking like a total predator. The two assassins were now completely incapacitated, left moaning on the floor. He grabbed one of the assassins by the collar, his grip as strong as iron. He needs information. Specifically, he wants to know if a man named Parker sent them. When the guy refused to talk, Damien drove his dagger into his thigh, showing him exactly what he was dealing with. His eyes glow with a lethal crimson light that makes the killer's heart skip a beat. That's when a new figure appears in the hallway, a blonde swordsman with a distinct scar over his eye. Damien recognizes him instantly. It's Muckman, the man who made his first life a living hell. He finishes off the intruder at his feet, never taking his eyes off the new threat. A dark smirk crosses his face. Things are finally starting to get interesting. 17 years ago, this was the night his nightmare truly began. In his original timeline, he was dragged away by these men, screaming and begging for mercy. They didn't see him as a human, just a piece of property to be beaten into submission. He spent the rest of his childhood in chains, a broken orphan with no way out. Damien recalls the greedy face of Parker, the man who likely orchestrated his downfall in his previous life. In the present, his dagger strikes true, sinking into the dark-clad figure of an intruder. He stands over the fallen man, the quiet of the room shattered by the brief lethal struggle. "That son of a bitch," he mutters, his eyes burning with cold rage. "He sold me out." Muckman, the blonde mercenary leader, watches with a predatory smirk from the doorway. Muckman doesn't hesitate, lunging forward with a heavy sword strike. To any other 13-year-old, the attack would be a blur, but Damon dodges it with effortless grace. The mercenary's blade hits the floor and his smirk vanishes, replaced by sudden confusion. Damon looks at him with an unnerving calm, wondering if Muckman was always this slow and weak. He easily weaves through a flurry of attacks, his movements practiced and economical. "You bastard." Muckman bellows, his frustration boiling over as he fails to land a single blow. Damien's reflexes are forged from a lifetime of brutal combat and surviving against impossible odds. In his past life, he had eventually reached a level where he could perceive the hidden rhythm of an opponent. He watches Muckman's eyes, reading the intent behind every shift of his gaze. He tracks the subtle cues, the angle of the feet, the rotation of the waist, and the twitch of the shoulders. To Damien, Muckman's movements aren't a surprise. They are a clear map of his intended target. Muckman sees bulge in shock as he realizes he is completely outclassed by a child. "It's too obvious," Damien thinks, slipping past the mercenary's guard like a ghost. He drove his dagger into Muckman's sword arm, a precise strike the swordsman never saw coming. Muckman gasps in pain as his sword falls from his weakened grip. Damien gave him no chance to recover, using his foot to kick the sword far away. You little," Muckman snarls, his face contorted with agony and disbelief. The mercenary slumps against the wall, his bravado completely shattered. He stares at the young boy holding a bloodied blade to his throat, trembling as his world is turned upside down. Damien looms over him, the cold moonlight reflecting in his crimson eyes. "You're clearly just 13. Muckman stammers, unable to accept the reality of his defeat. Damien wiped the blood off his small dagger with an ice-cold expression, asking him if he wondered why he had so easily blocked his strike. He tells the man that his movements are so predictable he can see every attack coming a mile away. Muckman can only stare in mute horror, sweat beads rolling down his forehead. Damon doesn't care if he believes it or not. The results speak for themselves. Muckman tries to warn him that his death will only bring more trouble from his associates. Damon isn't intimidated, pointing out that a dead man can't spread any rumors. He leans in close, his voice a lethal whisper, asking if it was Parker who orchestrated the hit. The silence in the room is heavy as Damien waits for the answer that will confirm his suspicions. He makes it clear that he's willing to maim the man if he continues to withhold the truth. Muckman looks into the eyes of a 13-year-old and sees the soul of a merciless centurion. Damon's stare is unrelenting, a predator waiting for its prey to break. Terrified for his life, Muckman finally confesses that Parker was indeed the one behind the plot. Damien nods slowly. "That's all I needed," he says, his voice flat and final. Muckman's eyes widen with a final desperate surge of fear as he realizes his confession won't save him. Damien delivers the killing blow without a hint of hesitation or remorse. He looks back at the bodies knowing he needs to finish cleaning up before he makes his escape. Damien reflects on the hard-earned wisdom from his past life that it is best to avoid making enemies whenever possible. However, he knows that once an enemy is made, there is only one logical course of action. He stares coldly at the bloody scene in his room, reinforcing his resolve. He must thoroughly crush those who stand against him. Outside, the moon shines brightly over the estate, oblivious to the violence unfolding within its walls. In a separate office, a hooded mercenary checks his pocket watch, confident that the job at the estate should be nearing completion. Parker sits at his desk, nursing a bruised cheek and fuming with rage at the thought of Damien coming his way. The mercenary reassures him, promising to finish the job and drag the boy there. The mercenary smirks, nodding how deeply angry Parker must be to hire a professional to catch a mere child. Parker slams his fist onto the desk, his face contorted with hatred for the bastard who caused him such humiliation. The mercenary tells Parker to be patient, warning him not to even think about cutting the payment just because the job took a little longer than expected. A sudden knock at the door interrupts their conversation, causing Parker to look up in surprise. The mercenary senses someone's presence, announcing that their target has arrived. Parker's thoughts are filled with murderous intent, held back only by the promise of an insurance contract. Once the contract is settled, Parker vows to completely destroy the boy who has caused him so much trouble. The mercenary wondered why it was taking so long, assuming his underlings had already returned. With a sudden burst of movement, a figure enters the room, catching the mercenary off guard. Parker lets out a startled yelp from behind his desk while the mercenary wonders if his partner failed. Damien steps into the light, spear in hand, his expression calm and determined. "Are you Damien?" the mercenary asks, only to be met with a mocking retort. The mercenary's brow furrows as the young boy has the audacity to call him a lackey. Damien doesn't mince words, calling the man a lackey for the pig sitting behind the desk. The mercenary bursts into a cold laugh, finding the boy's arrogance amusing despite the situation. Parker's eyes bulge in shock and greed as the mercenary demands a triple commission fee for this unexpected turn of events. The mercenary justifies the increase, claiming they have already suffered a huge loss at the boy's hands. He gestures toward Damien's weapon. "Do you see the blood on the end of that stick?" He asks, his voice low and dangerous. Damien stands his ground, the blood-tipped spear a testament to the lives he's already taken tonight. To the mercenary, the boy is an unexpected variable that must be dealt with swiftly. Parker is sweating bullets, panicking over how much this is going to cost him. Montel starts putting his sword away, ready to walk off the job. Parker loses his mind, begging him to stay. The mercenary looks back at Damien, who hasn't shifted from his fighting stance for a second. Damon's cold stare is enough to make Parker squeal in terror. Desperate, Parker screams that he'll triple the pay just to keep the mercenary in the room. That was all Mont needed to hear. He draws his blade again, satisfied with the new deal. He tells Damien he doesn't care about his fallen men, it's all just business. Damien looks him dead in the eye and says that he actually has plenty of feelings about this. He remembers his past life being hunted through alleys like a dog by bastards just like them. Half his previous life was spent rotting in the slums after they destroyed his monarch. He grips his spear, promising that no one is getting a free pass this time. He tells the mercenary to stop asking why and just prepare to die. Montel lunges forward, calling Damien nothing but an arrogant little brat. Damien's already moving, aiming his spear low to take out the mercenary's mobility. Montel's eyes go wide as he realizes the kid isn't fighting like an amateur. Damien spins his spear with veteran precision. Montel realizes he's in real trouble. Their weapons clash, sending sparks flying across the office. Damien stays light on his feet, dodging and weaving through every strike. Montel tries to find an opening, but the kid is too fast. The mercenary intended to strike high, forcing the boy to defend his face. Once the opening appeared, he intended to drive his blade into the boy's leg. Everything was going according to the mercenary's plan. As his relentless strikes kept the boy on the defensive, the mercenary successfully drew Damon's attention with a high punch. He smirked mockingly. "This is the real attack, kid." As he lunged his blade toward the boy's thigh, but all he got in return was a look of confusion as he completely failed to keep up with Damien's movements. Damien predicted exactly how the mercenary would react to his initial move. A heavy blow connects, sending Montel stumbling back with a groan. Damien just stands there perfectly calm, telling him he saw it all coming. Montel grits his teeth, cursing the little brat who's systematically dismantling him. He lets out one last desperate scream and lunges in to kill, but his eyes go vacant as the realization of his failure hits him. The mercenary hits the floor in a heap of blood. Damien looks down at the body, acknowledging the guy was stronger than the usual thugs, but in the end he was still just more back alley trash to be cleared out. With the mercenary dealt with, Damien turns his attention back to his uncle. Parker is on his knees, shaking and begging Damien to listen to him. Damien starts walking forward, his boots clicking rhythmically on the floor. Parker scrambles back in pure terror, screaming for him to stay away. A horrific scream echoes out from the mansion and into the night. Cut to a week later. A bank official informs Damien of a massive deposit into his account. Damien looks over the paperwork. First order of business after the incident was collecting the insurance. He bows politely to the official, looking like a perfectly normal, well-behaved noble boy. As the carriage pulls away, the official tentatively asks Damien where he's headed next. He notes that the carriage Damien arrived and suggests he's preparing for a very long journey. Damien looks out the window and calmly states that he's planning to enlist in the army. The official is stunned, but Damien just adds that there are people he needs to meet. As the wheels rattle against the road, Damien reflects on his decision. He knows his old comrades will be there. But more importantly, the military is the only place he truly belongs. In his mind, he sees the future. In just 5 short years, the world as they know it will completely change. Conscription will become mandatory for every young man as a massive, unavoidable conflict begins to brew. The age of war is coming, and no corner of the kingdom will be safe from the bloodshed. Damien touches his chest, thankful that in this timeline, the incident that shattered his mana hole never happened. He knows it's far better to volunteer now while he's young instead of waiting until he's 25 like before. His first step is to spend a week training in the capital using a specialized cultivation method. Instead of being swept away by the currents of the era, Damien intends to be the one who rules it. He stares ahead with a cold determination, his mind already set on the battles to come. A week passes, and the scene shifts to the imposing stone walls of a military outpost. A spear strikes a training dummy with explosive force, sending wood chips flying. A group of onlookers watches in awe, wondering who the kid is and where he learned to fight like that. Damien finishes his drill, annoyed that his current body is still far too weak for his liking. Damien looked down at his small, unblemished hands, now starting to bleed from the intense training. He couldn't help but wish they had the callous toughness from his past life. The skin is soft and prone to blistering, a frustrating reminder of how much work he has ahead. An officer approaches Damien, asking if he's here to apply as a new trainee. The man is genuinely impressed by Damien's spear technique and asks where he learned it. Damien wonders if the officer recognized the style as the legendary kingdom's greatest spear art. It's a fancy name for the basic style used by every soldier in the kingdom, but Damien's mastery makes it look like something else entirely. He quickly lies, claiming it was just a technique his late father taught him. The officer immediately apologizes for prying into such a personal matter. Damien reassures him, adding that his father took great pride in his service, which is why he's enlisting too. The instructor is completely sold on the story, practically awarding him a perfect score on the spot. Clearing his throat, the man asks for the young man's name. Standing at attention, he introduces himself simply as Damien. The officer wishes him luck and heads off, satisfied with the new recruit. Damien watches him go, bowing politely and thanking him for his time. Once alone, a strange familiar energy begins to swirl around Damon right quota's hand. He recognizes the feeling immediately, the warmth of mana flowing through his body. He smiles to himself, realizing he can finally use mana in this new life. It's all thanks to the Delfted mana cultivation method, the technique he spent years memorizing. It was a futuristic method developed 15 years later by a genius from the Delft family. The method was notoriously difficult and demanding, but it was famous for being the most efficient style in existence. He remembers how his old comrades used to tease him for studying it so hard back in the day. They thought it was a waste of time since his mana hole was shattered, and he couldn't even handle mana anyway. Damien had just gritted his teeth and kept memorizing, hoping to find any method that might help him. All that teasing was for nothing because now that forbidden knowledge is his greatest weapon. Damien stands alone in a quiet moment, focusing his energy until a faint purple aura of mana swirls around his waist. He is ready for the exam. He looks toward the training grounds, his crimson eyes sharp with a cold, unwavering focus. As he walks, his mind goes back to his past life, remembering a specific man who was the heart of the third training camp. He recalls Raymond, a tall, muscular instructor with swept-back gray hair and a stern, professional demeanor. Damien wonders how he compares to that legend. Now, the wide training camp is filled with dozens of young applicants, all gathered under the bright sun for the first day of trials. The first test is announced. A simple yet grueling test of strength where each boy must lift a large, heavy boulder. Damien stares down at his rock, preparing for the strain. The goal is to lift a 30 kg stone completely over one's head. It's a perfect way to weed out those who are physically unfit for the military before the real training even begins. With a sudden burst of power, Damien heaves the boulder up until his arms lock. The proctor shouts his name and declares him a pass. He exhales slowly, barely breaking a sweat. Since he's already mastered 1-star mana, this level of physical exertion is nothing to him. The instructors gather the remaining recruits together as the first round of testing comes to a close. Raymond, the stern instructor Damien remembered, stands on a platform and bellows for silence to announce the second phase. The long-distance run, he yells, his voice booming across the field. Damien stands ready among the other trainees. Raymond explains the rules. A 90-minute time limit for the course. Minor bumping is allowed, but nothing more. He warns them that anyone caught attacking another applicant will be disqualified immediately. Damien realizes the rule is a trap. The instructors must have mixed themselves into the crowd to catch anyone trying to cheat. He spots a group of men who look far too experienced and composed to be normal recruits, watching the crowd like hawks. A slight smirk crosses Damon's face. He knows exactly how this game is played and decides to have some fun with it. A long red line marks the start of the designated track that winds through the training grounds. While he stretches his arms, someone mentions they're in the same group. Damien looks up curious. He sees a friendly-looking boy with shaggy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. The boy admits he's been watching Damien for a while. Damien is struck by a sense of déjà vu. He's certain he knows this boy's face from his memories of the future. The blond boy leans in close, a knowing smile on his face as he asks Damien if he's really going to keep feigning ignorance. In a low whisper, the boy reveals his discovery. He knows that Damien is secretly using mana. Damien reflects that while it's unusual for a commoner to have mana, it's usually a sign of a very special background or wealthy backing. He doesn't deny it, instead sizing up the boy, who is observant enough to notice his subtle technique. The boy asks for Damien's name, prompting Damien to ask for his in return. "It's Appel," the boy says proudly. Damon's eyes widen as the name clicks in his head. This is the future legend. Damien recalls that Appel was a commoner-born hero who became a general and a count by the age of 30. He was the ultimate inspiration for every common soldier, a man whose rise to power was nothing short of legendary. Appel mentions he was getting bored because no one else their age was worth talking to. So he's glad he found Damien. He suggests they both do their best in the race. Damien considers that it's better to be on good terms with such a talented individual. They seal their agreement with a firm handshake, a meeting of two future powerhouses. Raymond's voice interrupts them, yelling for everyone to get ready as he prepares to start the race. A piercing whistle blows and the crowd of recruits explodes into motion, their boots pounding against the earth. The applicants charge forward, desperate to secure a good position in the opening moments of the long run. Damien runs with a calm, efficient stride, nodding that many others are already sprinting too hard right out of the gate. He looks at a tight group of runners ahead, calling them the Wall of Wailing, the real gatekeeper of this entire exam. Appel keeps pace easily, suggesting they just tag along behind the leaders and overtake them at the very end. Damien thinks it's a solid strategy, but he suddenly bursts with speed, his eyes glowing red. He has no intention of playing it safe. Appel is left trailing behind, his mouth hanging open in shock at Damien's sudden explosive acceleration. A group of older trainees watches the boy fly past, deciding to stick to their slow and steady pace until the final stretch. As he runs, a brown-haired applicant looks over his shoulder, wondering if they can keep up this insane pace until the end. He spots Damien sprinting far ahead and can't help but yell out, "What's up with that crazy bastard?" Two other runners watch Damien's back with a mix of amusement and annoyance, nodding that they've got a real hot blood in their midst this year. One of them, a man with a bandana, smirks and decides to give the rookie a little wake-up call, though he promises to be gentle. The man reaches out to shove Damien, but before he can even make contact, Damien's shoulder brushes past him with incredible force. Damien doesn't even look back as he weaves through the crowd like a blur, leaving the older runner stumbling in his wake. He continues to accelerate, his movements fluid and efficient as he carves a path through the sea of applicants. His sudden burst of speed causes a chain reaction, with the instructors shouting orders to stop him before he disrupts the entire flow of the race. Damien knows that while the instructors are skilled, they are still just camp trainers compared to the monsters he faced in his previous life. He uses their surprise to his advantage, kicking up a trail of dust as he widens the gap between himself and the rest of the pack. Watching from within the crowd, other applicants are inspired by his bold move, their own competitive fires beginning to burn. Appel, running among them, grins with excitement. He isn't about to let himself be outdone by someone his own age. Appel leans forward and charges, a streak of blue light trailing behind him as he follows in Damien's wake. The other recruits are thrown into a frenzy, shouting that they should follow the same aggressive strategy. "Let's go, too." The one sorterly run quickly devolves into a chaotic scramble as everyone tries to keep up with the new blistering pace. Looking down from a distance, the scene is one of total pandemonium with dust clouds rising all along the track. Two instructors watch the spectacle with concern, wondering if the second training ground is always this chaotic. One asks if they should deploy more staff. A calm, authoritative voice tells them to leave it be, standing firm even as the chaos unfolds before them. Instructor Raymond walks slowly toward them, his hands clasped behind his back. He dismisses their worries about rigging the exam. He points out that being able to influence others and change the flow of a battle is a vital skill in itself. Damien is doing exactly that. Raymond's lips curl into a small, impressed smile. His instincts were right. This boy is a wild card who can create unexpected variables. He watches as the sea of applicants follows Damien's lead. The entire group moving as one under the boy's unintended leaders on a battlefield aren't always the strongest. They are the ones who know exactly how to light a spark in the hearts of others. Damien's lungs are burning, but he's finally hitting the 29th lap. He pushes through the exhaustion for the final stretch. Right as he does, Appel pulls up beside him. The blonde kid notices Damien's still got plenty of energy and asks if this was all part of the plan. Looking back at the other recruits collapsed in the dirt, it's a total massacre. Without using mana, they'd be right there with them. Damien just smirks. "If you've got a trump card, you might as well play it." Appel laughs, realizing he's found someone actually worth competing with. They hit the finish line at the same time. The instructor is left speechless as they both secure an official pass. Inside a Heil command center, word is starting to spread about a certain new recruit. Raymond, one of the camp instructors, sent in a report about a 13-year-old kid who's already turning heads. Raymond is usually impossible to impress, so this report definitely gets some attention. The man in charge is starting to get genuinely curious. He's a rugged commander with an eye patch and he wants to know exactly who he's dealing with. Back at the training camp, the atmosphere is heavy. The results are posted, and it's a messy mix of soul-crushing despair and pure relief. Damien stands there with his arms crossed, wondering why everyone's treating a military draft like a lottery win. In his memory of the future war, conscription was a death sentence people would do anything to dodge, but for now, the capital is still living in a bubble of peace. Suddenly, Appel comes over to congratulate his new squadmate. Damon realizes they both managed to make the cut. The blonde boy points out the name right at the top. Damon is ranked first among everyone. Appel is looking forward to working together, even if they don't end up in the same unit. They've got 1 week of freedom left before they're officially owned by the army. Damien's not planning on resting, though. He's already got a busy schedule ahead. He tells Appel he needs to head into the city to pick up some supplies. Appel gives him a pro tip about the military boots. Apparently, they're like walking on rocks and need extra padding. Damien doesn't need the warning. He can still feel the blisters from his previous life. He thanks the guy for the advice anyway. When asked about his own plans, Appel says he has some business to handle, too. He tries to whistle it off, but Damien can tell there's more to this kid than he's letting on. They wave goodbye and head their separate ways for the week. As soon as Damien is out of sight, an old man in a hood approaches Appel. Turns out the friendly recruit is actually a young master with a private carriage waiting. Appel watches him go, wondering why a kid with that much mana potential would even bother enlisting. During the entrance exams, he could already sense that Damien wasn't just some ordinary civilian. Damien replied that his remark back then probably came off as him bragging about his own talent. Appel wiped his brow and laughed off Damien's remark. Damien simply replied that the military was the only place where he could truly prepare for what was coming. Back in the present, Appel realizes that Damien is definitely hiding some deep secrets of his own. The blonde boy tells his servant Alan that this is a guy they'll be seeing for a long time. Alan has the carriage prepped and ready to roll. Appel gives the old man a hard time about calling him young master out in the open. They disappear back into the heart of the city. The capital looks magnificent from above, bathed in the midday sun. Walking through the streets, Damien finds the sheer scale of the piece almost unbelievable. While most are busy buying and selling, the gap between the rich and poor is already visible. Beggars in the shadows plead for even a crumb of bread as people pass them by. Damien knows this whole lively scene is going to be a wasteland in just 5 years. His first priority is finding the Wick Merchant Guild before the world goes to hell. Once the war starts, artifacts and simple rations are going to be worth more than gold, and the merchant guilds are the ones who are going to hold all the cards. In the past, the Wick Merchant Guild was known as the wealthiest and most influential power on the continent. Their reach even extended to the most remote military outposts during the war. At the front lines, a weary soldier spots the relief supplies finally pulling into camp. It's the Wack Guild's carriages, the only thing standing between these men and total starvation. Some soldiers are bitter watching merchants get rich while they die on the battlefield. Damien, as a seasoned veteran in this memory, reminds them that without those supplies, they'd all be long dead. The recruit knows he's right, but the resentment is still hard to shake. Still, funding charity on such a massive scale during a war is no easy feat. The order is given for everyone to go and grab what they can. The troops scramble toward the wagons before everything is picked clean. A soldier points out the figure overseeing the distribution, the guild master himself. Damien looks over and sees someone in a distinctive white robe standing at the head of the caravan. In that memory, he thought the master looked like a total arrogant prick. Back in the present, young Damien realizes that the Wick Guild's charity started long before the war ever broke out. He's narrowed his search down to 7 major guilds in the capital that might fit the bill. He needs to find one with enough capital to survive the coming conflict. The sun is starting to set over the horizon. As he continues his search, he reaches the door of one last guild, hoping he finally found the right place. Damien lets himself in and calls out to see if anyone's around. A polite man in a vest walks out to greet the young visitor. Damon gives a respectful bow, mentally crossing his fingers that this isn't another dead end. He gets straight to the point, mentioning that he wants to invest in their charity work. The merchant is amused by the kid's ambition, thinking he has a noble mindset for someone so young. Damien is just relieved. Every other guild he visited today was a complete bust. The man introduces himself as Wack, the head of the HL Merchant Guild. Damien freezes the name matches. He's finally found the right man. He introduces himself as Demian and takes a seat to talk business. Then he drops a weirdly specific question asking if Wick has a son. Wick just laughs, saying he doesn't have a son, only one immature daughter. Damon's heart sinks for a second, wondering if he's made a mistake. Just then, the door swings open behind him. A young girl's voice calls out, announcing she's back home. Damon turns around and his eyes widen. He recognizes that face instantly. Wick introduces his daughter and tells her about Damien's interest in their charity project. She gives him a warm smile and a polite greeting. She's curious about this kid who's so eager to put money into their work. Damien is having an internal crisis because his memory was sure the future guild master was a man. But looking at her, the resemblance is too perfect to be anything else. He starts to wonder if that pretty guy in the white robe from his memory was her all along. She asks him for a specific number. How much does he actually want to invest? Damon clears his throat and casually drops a bomb. He wants to start with 300 gold pieces. Week and his daughter are absolutely floored. They can't believe a child is throwing around that kind of fortune. Week is hesitant, clarifying that if this is an investment and not a donation, the terms will be very different. Damien confirms his intent. In exchange for his gold, he wants a significant portion of the HL Merchant Guild's future shares. Week can't help but wonder how a boy this young came into such a massive fortune. He stares at the kid, trying to gauge if this is some kind of elaborate prank or a serious business offer. He politely asks if Damien would be willing to reveal the source of such a large sum of money. Damien keeps a straight face, claiming it's just inheritance from his late parents, and he wants it to go toward a good cause. Week apologizes for the prying, and Damien waves it off with a calm smile. Understanding the merchants' caution, Wack explains he'll need to hold a meeting with the rest of the guild to discuss the shares, and they agree to speak again once a decision is made. After Damien leaves, Wick stands in the hallway with his daughter, still trying to wrap his head around the encounter. He finds it surprising that a boy of only 13 could be so bold and composed, but he saw something in those sharp crimson eyes, a depth and intensity that belongs to someone far older than a child. He jokes that if the boy were just 5 years older, he'd be the perfect match for his daughter. His daughter's face turns bright red as she tells her dad to knock it off and stop talking nonsense. She's completely flustered by the suggestion while Wick just laughs at her predictable reaction. Time passes quickly after the deal is struck, and soon the day of enlistment finally arrives. Damien stands before the training camp gates, feeling like today is the true beginning of his fresh start. He looks up at the bright sky, resolved to make sure this life doesn't vanish in vain like the last one. Clenching his fist, he vows to be the one who eventually devours the Empire from the inside out. He steps into the barracks of the 3rd training camp assigned to the 1st platoon. He scans the room for familiar faces, but he doesn't recognize anyone from his previous life yet. He tosses his bag onto his assigned bed, a bit disappointed that he hasn't run into his old friend Appel yet. Suddenly, a booming voice calls out a greeting, catching everyone's attention. A muscular man named Brian introduces himself as the platoon leader who will be in charge for the next month. He wastes no time announcing that they are starting a personal effects inspection immediately. He's looking for anything forbidden, extra food, drinks, or luxury goods like alcohol and tobacco. With a terrifyingly cheerful smile, he warns that anyone caught hiding things will have a very fun time with him. Damien watches the other recruits panic as they realize they've brought things they shouldn't have. He thinks they're all idiots for being so obvious about their fear and making themselves targets. Brian bellows for everyone to empty their bags and belongings for inspection. He looks over Damon's small pile of items and finds nothing suspicious or special. Then he pauses, leaning in to ask the small recruit exactly how old he is. When Damien calmly confirms he's only 13, the platoon leader can't hide it. The other recruits start whispering, complaining that the military is going to the dogs if they're letting brats join. One burly recruit glares at Damien, clearly resenting the kid's presence in the barracks. Damon closes his eyes, deciding there's no point in responding to a guy like that. But internally, he's memorized the guy's face, resolved to show him that a kid's strike can still hurt plenty. Brian moves on to the next bed, and the recruit who is glaring suddenly feels a cold chill of dread. Brian towers over the man, ordering him to empty his bag just like everyone else did. The platoon leader leans in with a menacing grin, asking if he needs to personally search the bag. Terrified, the guy starts frantically dumping out everything he has, revealing the contraband he tried to hide. Brian turns back to the rest of the group, issuing a final stern warning. Anyone else caught hiding forbidden goods will spend their entire night running laps around the training yard. Brian continues his inspection, shouting for the recruits to hurry up and empty their bags completely. Damien watches from his bed, thinking to himself that it serves the idiots right for trying to bring contraband into a military camp. Once the bags are cleared, Brian mentions that he needs to select a cadet platoon leader to help manage the soldiers. He pulls a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, looking through the scores of the recent entrance exams. He notes that one soldier in their platoon passed with exceptionally high scores, and he scans the room for the name on the list. He calls out the name Damien, looking around the room to see who will step forward. His eyes briefly land on the burly recruit who was glaring earlier, but he quickly dismisses him, knowing a leader needs character as well as skill. But Brian wasn't one to jump to conclusions, so he double-checked by asking if the burly recruit was indeed Damien. From a corner of the room, a boy's voice calmly confirmed, "I'm right here." Brian stops dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as he realizes the top scorer is the 13-year-old boy. He stares down at the kid, completely blindsided by the fact that someone so young outperformed every other recruit. He double-checks Damon's age, and the boy calmly confirms that he is indeed only 13 years old. Burly recruit Kyle snaps in frustration, complaining that the military isn't a playground for children. Brian tells Kyle to quiet down, but the older recruit refuses to let the matter go. Kyle argues that a cadet leader needs to have clear leadership skills, and that a brat like Damien will only ruin the platoon's discipline. He points a finger aggressively at Damien, making it clear he won't take orders from someone so much younger than him. Damien lets out a small mocking smirk, thinking that he didn't even want the extra hassle of being the leader. However, he decides to play along just this once, finding it amusing to bait someone so easily provoked. With a sharp, confident smile, Damien remarks that he would still do a better job than with nothing but muscles in his head. Kyle is stunned into silence for a second before Brian steps in, confirming the older man's name is indeed Kyle. Brian reaches out and firmly grabs Kyle Right's shoulder, his grip tightening as a warning. He leans in close, his expression dark as he tells Kyle that if he insults his fellow soldiers again, there will be more than just a warning. Kyle is visibly sweating as the instructor looms over him. Brian points out that leadership requires more than just a high score. Kyle tries to protest again, but he can barely get the words out. Brian proposes a solution, a direct sparring match between the two of them. Whoever wins will officially become the cadet platoon leader. Brian turns to Damien and asks if he's actually okay with this arrangement. Damien realizes this is the perfect chance to establish some real discipline. He points right at Kyle and asks if all he has to do is crush this big lump of muscle. The rest of the trainees are more than happy to watch the show. The whole platoon wastes no time and heads straight for the arena. Kyle wears a smug grin, convinced he's about to humble a child. Damien remains perfectly calm as the match is called to start. Damon and the massive trainee Kyle face off in the training grounds while the instructor lays out the rules. If one of them surrenders, the spar ends immediately. Kyle's got a cocky smirk on his face, more than ready to show this kid why size matters. Damien gives a calm nod. He's ready to get this over with. The crowd of trainees watches with bated breath as the signal is given and the match begins. Kyle flexes his muscles and mocks the boy, saying it feels like he's just bullying a kid. Damien tells the big guy to stop showboating and just bring it. The taunt strikes a nerve, and Kyle's muscles ripple as his temper flares. He charges forward with a roar, determined to shut Damien's mouth for good. Damien watches him close the distance, nodding that compared to the veterans from his past life, the guy is actually decent. But being decent isn't going to save him today. Kyle throws a heavy punch, but in Damien's eyes it's just basic. He casually leans back, letting the massive fist whistle harmlessly past his face. Kyle's eyes go wide. It's like the kid already knew exactly where he was going to swing. Frustrated, the big guy keeps swinging, accusing Damien of using cheap tricks. Damon stays completely relaxed. To him, these moves are just painfully slow. Losing his cool, Kyle decides that if he can't land a punch, he'll just use his weight to slam Damien into the dirt. He lunges for a grab, but Damon is already a step ahead. The grab misses by an inch as Damon slips past him like a shadow. Kyle looks around in a panic, wondering where his target went, only to hear Damon's voice right behind him. Damon Right's gaze sharpens as he decides to put an end to this. A man-infused fist connects right with Kyle's ribs, sending a shock wave through the big man's body. Damien knows that taking a direct hit from Mana isn't something a normal trainee can just shrug off. Kyle manages to stay on his feet, though he's clearly in a lot of pain. Damien admits the guy is tougher than he expected, but his pride is shattered. He roars in fury, swearing he's going to kill the kid. He charges one last time, but Damon has seen enough. It's time to wrap this up. Another heavy blow lands, cutting right through Kyle's reckless assault. The big man finally hits the ground, his strength completely spent. Kyle is out cold, face down in the dirt. Damien calmly brushes off his hands, looking like he didn't even break a sweat. He turns to the rest of the shocked trainees, asking if anyone else wants to step up and take him on. Everyone stays silent, nervously shaking their heads. No one wants any part of that. With the fight settled, the instructor officially names Damien the platoon leader cadet. A little later, Kyle is discharged from the infirmary and starts heading back toward the barracks. He's still trying to process what happened. He was out cold before he even knew what hit him. All he remembers is that first strike to his side, and then everything went black. He realized he'd lost consciousness back then. He stops at the door, feeling humiliated by how badly he was beaten. When he steps inside, the other trainees tense up, expecting him to start another fight. They whisper about stopping him before he ends up back in a hospital bed. but Kyle just walks straight up to Damien, who looks back with a calm, neutral expression. To everyone's shock, the big guy drops to his knees, admitting his defeat and pledging to serve Damien as his leader. Even Damien is caught off guard by the sudden, humble show of respect. Kyle explains that Damien is the youngest, but definitely the strongest warrior he's ever faced. He formally asks for permission to serve under him, and Damien realizes he's just gained a very powerful and loyal ally. Damien looks at Kyle, genuinely surprised. He thought the big guy was just a mindless thug, but it turns out he actually cares about things like respect and manners. He tells Kyle to drop the formal titles. Being called leader is unnecessary. He'd rather just be called Damien. He offers his hand to his former rival, suggesting they start getting along from here on out. Kyle takes the hand with a firm grip and a determined look, eager to prove his worth as a teammate. A week of grueling military training passes in what feels like a blink of an eye. The instructors keep the pressure high, never letting the recruits catch their breath. Damien pushes through the exhaustion, realizing that the high intensity is exactly what makes the time fly by so quickly. As a drill ends, the instructor dismisses the group back to the barracks, but orders Damien to stay behind and follow him. Damien wonders where they're heading in such a hurry and what could be so urgent. They arrive at the administration office, and Damien guesses that some kind of important announcement is coming. Stepping inside, he realizes he isn't alone. The other platoon leaders have already been gathered. He finds his place among them, waiting patiently to hear why they've been summoned. Immediately, the leader of the 4th platoon starts causing trouble, calling Damien a pipsqueak before jokingly pretending he only meant to think it. He doesn't stop there, mocking Damon's thin frame and comparing him to a praying mantis. The guy laughs at the idea of Damien standing next to the massive Kyle, given how completely opposite their body types are. Damien stares him down until the guy snaps, demanding to know what he's looking at. Damien just calmly remarks that he was wondering how far the guy's eyes could stretch. The insult hits home and the 4th platoon leader gets even more heated, while another cadet can't help but snicker at the exchange. Instructor Raymond shuts down the noise instantly, demanding silence and asking if they think they're in a playground instead of a military office. The arrogant cadet backs down, but glares at Damien, whispering that he'll settle the score later. Damien doesn't even flinch. Raymond addresses the gathered leaders, explaining that a week from now, things are going to get much more serious. An interplatoon group battle has been scheduled as their first major midterm evaluation, and they need to have their units ready for it. The cadets shout their understanding in unison, clearly feeling the weight of the upcoming challenge. Once the meeting is over, everyone is dismissed back to their respective barracks to begin their preparations. On the way out, the 4th platoon leader stops Damien. Clearly not done being a bully, he asks if Damien is too young to read the room and warns him that he's going to end up getting his tail kicked. Right then, another platoon leader stepped in to retort on Damien's behalf, calling him out for being disrespectful, even though they were both cadet leaders. He suggests the guy stop wasting time and actually go train his squad for a change. The guy was about to explode, but this platoon leader stepped in with a perfectly calm demeanor and asked if he was really so sure about who was going to be doing the beating. He tells Damien to just ignore the idiot and head back with him. Damon pauses as the other cadet stops to introduce himself properly. It turns out the loudmouth is indeed the leader of the 4th platoon, and he's clearly taken an immediate dislike to Damien. Damien just gives a cold smirk, promising he'll remember that face when they meet on the battlefield. As they walk away, the other leader confirms Damien's identity, having clearly heard his name before. He says he's heard plenty from a guy named Appel in his platoon and mentions that Damien took first place in the practical exam. He introduces himself as Gerard, the leader of the 3rd platoon, and tells Damien he's looking forward to seeing him in action. Damien's response is simple. Bring it on! Damien marches into his squad's barracks and immediately calls for everyone's attention. The recruits all look up, wondering what their young leader has to say after his meeting. He breaks the news. In exactly 1 week, they'll be heading into a full-scale interplatoon group battle. Damien holds their banner high, rallying them with the promise that they aren't just going to participate, they are going to take first place. He tells them there's one specific goal they need to keep in their minds during the training and the battle. There are 3 enemy platoons they'll have to face, but he has one in particular on his radar. With a menacing look in his eyes, he declares that they are going to absolutely crush the 4th platoon. His squad gets the message loud and clear. As the second week of training kicks off, the atmosphere at the camp shifts from mere practice to something much more intense and predatory. The instructor addresses the assembled trainees, declaring that the core purpose of the military is competition and the ultimate pursuit of victory. He announces that they will begin learning tactical formations this week, adding that individual performance during these drills will be rewarded with extra points. The recruits shout their compliance in unison, their voices ringing across the training grounds with newfound motivation. Damien considers the instructor's words. Knowing that everyone is aiming for the highest possible score to secure a spot in their preferred military branch, he wears a subtle knowing smile, clearly confident in his own tactical knowledge compared to the other raw recruits. The instructor gestures toward a diagram, introducing the wedge formation, a specialized offensive maneuver designed specifically to puncture enemy lines. Damien studies the lesson, recognizing the formation's strategic value and the specific risks it entails. A visualization of the wedge appears as a massive arrow. Damien knows that while it possesses great destructive power, it is vulnerable if the lead unit is broken. He muses that the formation's success hinges entirely on the strength of the spearhead at the very tip of the triangle. Glancing over at Kyle, Damien realizes he has the perfect person in his squad to serve as that unstoppable point of impact. The instructor orders the group to divide into two teams and immediately begin practicing the formation against one another. Damien takes charge of his unit while Kyle prepares to lead the opposition, the big trainee looking eager for a chance at a rematch. Damien calls his team together, offering them specific tactical tips that go beyond the basic instructions provided by the camp. When asked where he gained such insight, Damien explains that his father was a soldier and had taught him these nuances long ago. He huddles with his squad, whispering his plan and predicting that the other team will follow the manual's basic defensive patterns. His teammates look impressed and energized by the strategy, ready to put Damien's unconventional advice to the test. He gives precise orders, positioning the strongest recruits directly behind him and placing the shorter ones on the outer flanks. Damien emphasizes the need to hold their shields high enough to protect their heads, ensuring the formation remains an impenetrable shell. Watching the other side set up, Damien notes that they are indeed preparing a strategy that is heavily focused on static defense. He isn't concerned in the least. He's convinced that his squad's momentum will allow them to smash right through the opposing line. As the battle commenced, Damien urged his men not to slow down, aiming to resolve the engagement with a single decisive blow. The instructor's voice booms across the field, officially signaling the start of the sparring session. Kyle's squad begins their advance in lockstep, the rhythmic call of left foot keeping their formation tight and synchronized. Damien was pleased to see that their coordination was remarkably good for first-timers, the formation moving forward without any sign of wavering. As they closed the final distance to Kyle's defensive line, Damien braced himself for the initial impact. He lets out a command to pick up the pace, turning their steady march into a high-speed collision. The two squads clash with a heavy impact, the recruits on both sides grunting as they push against the opposing shield wall. Damien realizes it's time for him to step up and decides to use his mana to amplify his physical strength. While he avoided using mana during basic physical training, he knows that in a tactical battle, he needs to make every advantage count. He lunges forward with a powerful shove, his shield glowing slightly as he forces his way into the heart of the enemy's defense. He shouts for his team to push harder and specifically target the gaps between the enemy's shields as they planned. By attacking the structural weaknesses of the formation rather than the individuals themselves, they cause the opposing line to buckle. The enemy recruits begin to panic, realizing their defensive line is failing, but unsure of how to stop the breach. Damien's eyes narrow as he spots the moment of maximum vulnerability in the opposing squad's stance. "Now's the time," he shouts, signaling for his team to execute the final part of their maneuver. The squad uses their training poles to reach low, hooking and sweeping at the feet of the defenders through the gaps in the shields. The opposing recruits are caught completely off guard, falling over one another as they lose their balance. Kyle watches in disbelief as his formation falls apart, screaming at his men to get up and keep fighting. He's visibly shaken and frustrated, realizing that Damien has completely outmaneuvered him yet again. Damien slams his shield directly against Kyle's, catching the big man's attention and asking if he's forgotten who he's actually fighting. Kyle grunts under the sudden pressure, telling Damon to move out of his way so he can try to salvage the match. Damon just looks at him with a calm, mocking expression, asking if Kyle really thinks he's in a position to be making demands. Kyle is sent reeling back, his eyes wide with shock at Damien's sudden maneuver. Damien presses his advantage, his movements fluid and precise as he completely disrupts Kyle's balance. Standing calmly before the struggling giant, Damon tells Kyle that while his natural strength is outstanding, he must learn to apply it with greater intelligence. Observing from the sidelines, the instructor couldn't help but be amazed, forced to admit that Damien's prowess far exceeded everything he had heard in the rumors. Surrounding recruits watched the scene with stunned expressions, struggling to reconcile Damien's slight frame with his overwhelming skill. The instructor steps in and calls for an end to the match, loudly declaring Damien's team the victors of the session. After the bout, Kyle grips Damon's hand with a determined look, promising that he won't lose their next encounter. Curious about the tactical loss, Kyle asks Damien about the specific strategy he used and if targeting the formation's gaps was intentional. As the official training ends, groups of recruits linger on the field, debating how they could have countered Damien's maneuvers. Damien watches them with a sense of quiet satisfaction, noticing that they are no longer rushing back to the barracks for rest. Instead, the trainees are actively reviewing their performance and engaging in self-directed practice under the setting sun. Damien smiles to himself, thinking that with such a dedicated atmosphere, their squad will be more than ready for the upcoming competition. His thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of the Squad 4 leader trainee and his group. Damien turns his head, sensing a shift in the mood as the new arrivals approach with obvious hostility. The members of Squad 4 point and laugh at Damien's squad, mockingly asking if there's something wrong with their heads for following a brat. Damien's teammates are instantly riled up, their faces contorting with anger at the blatant disrespect from the other squad. One of the Squad 4 members continues to jeer, questioning how low the standards of Damien's squad must be to accept such a young leader. The Squad 4 leader trainee smirks condescendingly, adding that it's the fault of someone who doesn't know their place acting as a squad leader. Damien looks back at him with a weary, unimpressed stare, wondering if the older boy is simply looking for an excuse to get beaten. He ultimately decides to ignore the insult, realizing there's no honor in responding to the hollow provocations of a nobody. Turning back to his men, Damien calmly gives the order for Squad 1 to return to their barracks for the evening. Behind him, the sounds of mocking laughter and insults continue to ring out as Squad 4 realizes their target is leaving. Furious at the guys from Platoon 4, the members of Platoon 1 shouted that those bastards would be dead meat once they met in the actual competition. With their morale sky high, the squad members hurled final threats and insults at the cocky group to show them that their spirit was second to none, which even took Damien by surprise. Kyle's absolutely fuming, pointing at the guys from Squad 4 and telling them to get ready to die. He asks Damon if those are the same jerks he was talking about. Damon just nods, a bit surprised by the sudden outburst. The rest of the squad is just as fired up, looking like they're ready to tear through anyone who gets in their way. They're so motivated they even decide to skip their rest time just to keep training. Looking at them work, Damien realizes that the other squad's insults actually worked better than any pep talk. He smirks, thinking this little rivalry might actually be the best thing that could have happened to his unit. Later that night, Instructor Raymond reports to the camp commander in his private office. Commander Baris looks up from his desk, asking if there are actually any promising recruits in this batch. Raymond mentions there are a few, specifically highlighting two who really stand out. He points out that they're both remarkably young, but they already seem to know how to use mana. Bars wonders if they have some secret powerful background, but Raymond says they look like regular kids on paper. It doesn't make much sense since most people applying to the camp are just commoners. To a regular person, mana is basically a myth because the training methods are way too expensive. Looking over the files for Damien and Appel, Baris notes they both come from ordinary families, which is almost too perfect to be true. He then asks about a disturbance that broke out between the units earlier in the day. Raymond confirms it happened, and mentions that the whole thing centers around Damien. He explains that since Damien is so young for a leader, the other squads have been giving him a hard time, but that backfired because it only made Squad 1 more united and protective of their young leader. Bars is genuinely surprised that a bunch of older trainees would actually follow a kid like him. Raymond confirms their loyalty is the real deal, and Baris finds the whole thing fascinating. He taps his desk, coming up with a plan to see what these kids are truly made of. The two men huddle together in the office to discuss the details. Raymond worries the plan might be too much, but Baris is cold. If they can't handle it, they don't belong here. He figures if their teamwork is really that strong, this little test shouldn't be a problem. With a dark grin, Baris orders the training intensity for both squads to be raised to the absolute maximum. Kyle and the others suddenly freeze. They've got no clue why, but every single one of them just got a massive case of the goosebumps. Back at the barracks, the recruits are losing it over some sudden news. Apparently, their platoon in the 4th got slapped with extra training as punishment. One trainee is particularly ticked off, wondering if this is all because he mouthed off a few times. To make matters worse, they're adding crawling drills to the mix. Kyle leans in, asking Damien if the rumors about the crawling drills are actually true. Damon just sits there with his eyes closed. He knows exactly what the instructors are thinking, but he also knows that complaining won't change a thing. He gets up and starts walking, calling out the guys for acting like they came here just to play around. He turns back to the group, admitting that while the drills will definitely be brutal on their bodies, it's actually a prime opportunity to build more stamina than any of the other platoon. The guys stop their whining. Nobody wants to be the one who's less mature than a 13-year-old kid. Damien gives them a small smile, promising to help them through it so they can all do their best. Someone asks if they're really going to have to crawl over rough gravel. Damien shuts that down quick. The army isn't going to lay out soft blankets for them. Kyle looks surprised, nodding that Damon talked like a seasoned veteran. Damien just thought to himself, well, that's exactly what I am. In his past life, he spent a lot of time hugging the dirt just to stay alive on the battlefield. A small smirk plays on his lips. He knows the real reason they're doing this isn't just for the physical toll. Crawling drills are designed to exhaust you until you're covered in cuts and bruises. That's when the real test starts. When everyone's nerves are frayed and they start snapping at each other, it's a setup to see which platoon can actually keep their cool and stick together under intense stress. He knows exactly what the higher-ups are looking for, which platoon will hold firm and which will crumble. He glances over at his squad, wondering if the first platoon can actually outlast the fourth. Since he knows the game, he isn't about to let his team walk into a trap. He reaches into his trunk and tells everyone to grab the socks they were issued. The guys are completely lost. Why in the world would they need socks right now? Damien holds up a sock with a grin, telling them that these little things are about to become literal lifesavers. Out on the training grounds, the first platoon lines up under the bright sun, ready for the worst. A stern instructor named Nilsson steps forward, introducing himself and calling his assistant to the front. The assistant drops down to demonstrate the low crawl, spear held straight as he moves with mechanical precision. Nielsen points toward the barbed wire course and asks the recruits if they're ready to face the gravel. The recruits shout back a collective, "Yes, sir." That echoes across the field. Nielsen is impressed. These guys still have fire in their eyes, which is more than he can say for the fourth platoon. He gives the command for the first group to move out and clear the obstacles. The trainees throw themselves into the dirt and start tearing through the course. Nilsson watches them, thinking about how the company commander is pushing these kids way too fast. He expects them to struggle since crawling on this ground is pure agony for a rookie. But suddenly, his eyes go wide in total disbelief. Instead of struggling, the recruits are absolutely flying through the course at a speed that makes no sense. The first platoon instructor watches from the side, sweating as he tries to figure out how they're doing this. On day one, a trainee from the next group breaks his focus, asking when they get to go, and Nilsson hastily orders them to move out. Another wave of trainees hits the dirt, yelling as they blaze a trail under the wire. The instructors are losing their minds. These kids aren't just training, they're moving like starving berserkers. Damien finishes his run and calmly brushes himself off, knowing the instructors are seeing something they never expected. Kyle runs up, buzzing with excitement. He admits he actually had a hard time pretending it even hurt. He pulls up his sleeve to show off the secret, a makeshift pad hidden right where it matters. Turns out Damon's trick worked perfectly. The whole platoon is laughing and calling him a genius for turning their socks into elbow and knee pads. The first platoon's crawling drill is finally over. The trainees look like they just survived a war zone. Kyle walks up to Damien, curious as hell. He wants to know where a kid learned a trick like that. Damien keeps it vague, saying he picked it up from his late father, but he adds that his old man gave him one big warning. Right then, Instructor Nilsson starts losing his mind. He's figured out they used a trick and orders the whole platoon to do a 100 laps around the field in crawling position. The warning, never get caught by the instructor. Kyle starts cracking up, calling it a legendary saying. He slaps Damien on the back, but he's hitting way too hard. Damon starts wondering if the guy is actually trying to get some revenge for earlier. Later, as he rubs his sore shoulder near the weapons rack, Damon thinks about what's left of their basic training. Shield and spear training are finally up next. This means he finally gets to learn the kingdom's greatest spear art. Most people look down on it compared to noble styles, but in the right hands it was unbeatable. In his past life, this spear art was everything to him. It was the only way he could keep moving forward. He trained like his life depended on it. And after meeting his master, his skills reached a level most people couldn't even dream of. He remembers his master fondly, even if the guy was a complete nutcase. He knows their paths will cross again one day. Back in the barracks hallway, the fourth platoon is struggling. They just finished their own crawling drills on the sharp gravel, and they're absolutely miserable. Damien and Kyle watch from a distance as the other platoon completely falls apart. One of the fourth platoon guys is at his breaking point, yelling at everyone to just shut up and stop whining already. The tension in the hallway is thick enough to cut with a knife. It doesn't take long for them to start turning on each other. One guy snaps that being a squad leader doesn't mean anything in a mess like this. A few of Damien's guys watch the drama unfold, feeling pretty smug. They know if it wasn't for Damien's pads, they'd be in the exact same boat. While the fourth platoon is at each other's throats, Damien's squad is in the background laughing and relaxed. The difference is night and day. Two of the fourth platoon trainees stare at them with pure hatred. They can't figure out why the first platoon looks so perfectly fine. They're convinced Damien's group pulled some dirty trick. In their heads, it's the first platoon's fault they were even stuck with these drills in the first place. One guy clenches his fist, his knuckles turning white. He's already planning his revenge. The platoon competition is only a few days away, and he's determined to crush them then. Damien catches the look, but his focus is already shifting. He's got bigger goals than just winning a petty rivalry. Time flies by, and before they know it, the day of the big platoon competition finally arrives. All 4 platoon assemble in the main courtyard, rows of trainees standing at attention under the morning sun. Kyle leans over to Damien, looking him up and down. He mentions that Damien seems different somehow, but he can't quite put his finger on what it is. Damien just smiles to himself. He thinks maybe he just got a little bit taller, though he knows exactly what changed. Another trainee laughs, telling Kyle to stop teasing the kid since he's already pretty tall. Damon glances at Kyle. He wonders if the big guy sensed the change in his mana instinctively. Last night, he finally hit a major milestone, reaching the 2-star stage of the Delftid mana cultivation method. All those hours spent meditating in the dark, pushing his mana reserves to the limit, have finally paid off. He looks over at Kyle, calling his name to get his attention. He tells him plainly he doesn't just want to win. He wants their platoon to win by a landslide. There's a specific reason for it. The top 5 soldiers in the competition get to pick any piece of gear they want from the armory as a reward. Most people go for weapons or gear with one-time protection spells, but those are only C rank at best. That's not what he's after. He's looking for something much more valuable. He remembers a subordinate from his previous life mentioning a permanent ability ring hidden in the 3rd training camp's armory. It's a rank item that could change everything. To make sure he gets first pick, he has to take the top spot in the entire competition. If Appel, the other mana user, gets to pick first, there's a chance he might snatch the ring before Damien can. He asks Kyle if he's ready to pull his weight. Kyle just smirks, more than ready for the fight. Suddenly, a loud clap rings out through the courtyard as the instructor calls everyone to attention. The competition is officially starting. Kyle shouted to the group behind him. The 1st platoon leader is absolutely hyped. He's screaming at the top of his lungs, telling everyone that their leader is aiming for first place. Everyone, keep that in mind. The rest of the guys are just as fired up. They're all screaming, convinced that they're the ones who are going to win the whole thing. Kyle is grinning, satisfied that everyone is finally on the same page. Just then, an announcement booms through the courtyard. 1st platoon step forward. Damien and Kyle lead the way, standing tall at the front of their lines. The entire platoon looks steady and ready for whatever comes next. The rules of the competition are straightforward. Each match is split into 2 bouts, one where you attack and one where you defend. The 2nd platoon is up first, looking as grim as ever. They can't capture the flag within the time limit. It's an automatic loss. Damien narrows his eyes, already focused on the goal. He orders his team to get ready because they're going to be the ones setting the pace. He gives them one last piece of encouragement, telling them to stick to what they practiced. A chorus of shouts echoes back at him. He pulls Kyle aside for a quick reminder. On his signal, Kyle needs to use every bit of his massive strength to shove the front lines forward as hard as he can. Match start, the 2 groups collide in the center of the field, a wall of wood and muscles slamming together. The 2nd platoon charges in with a roar, their weapons held high as they try to break through. But the 1st platoon's line is rock solid. Their leader yells for them to hold their ground and keep the formation from breaking. The attackers are stunned. It doesn't feel like they're hitting people. It feels like they've run straight into a solid wall. The observers watch closely. The 2nd platoon is attacking first, but they aren't making any headway. Something is very wrong. One of the onlookers notes how unusual the 1st platoon's formation is. It's so dense and offensive that it seems like they shouldn't even be able to move. That's when Damien lets out a shout. Now push. The 2nd platoon trainees realize too late that they're in trouble. Kyle lets out a guttural roar, planting his feet and driving his weight into the enemy's shields with the power of a battering ram. 2nd platoon's line starts to buckle. Their leader is screaming for them to hold on, but they're being shoved back by sheer force. He's absolutely livid. They were supposed to be the ones on the offensive, yet they're being treated like training dummies. Damon keeps his eyes on Kyle, preparing for the next phase of the assault. Kyle doesn't slow down for a second. He yells that he's going all out, slamming his massive frame into anyone in his way. The 2nd platoon guys are being sent flying. They can't believe one guy can do this much damage without even using a shield. Kyle urged his comrades behind him, ordering them to stay right by his side so they could maintain the pressure. Together they lead the charge, a 2-man wrecking ball that shreds through the 2nd platoon's ranks. Kyle shouts for everyone to keep pushing. The 2nd platoon leader can only watch in horror. He can't understand how their teamwork could possibly be this perfect after only basic training. Damien spots the moment they've been waiting for. With a piercing shout, he orders the entire 1st platoon to charge through the opening. The field is a chaotic mess of dust and shouting as the 1st platoon completely overruns the 2nd. Up on the observation deck, the instructors are speechless. One turns to the 1st platoon leader, asking if he perhaps gave them extra training. The instructor is just as shocked as everyone else. He's never seen recruits perform like this after only receiving basic training. In his mind, they aren't even recruits anymore. At this level, they're roughly on par with elite soldiers who have received advanced training. He knows exactly who to credit for this transformation. He looks down at the field, his eyes searching for one specific trainee. It's all because of Damien. The kid is right in the thick of it, directing the flow of the entire battle. Damien's voice carries over the den, telling his squad to spread out and secure the space so they can finish the second platoon off. This success didn't happen by accident. Every night, the guys stayed up late in the barracks, getting extra help from Damien to make up for their shortcomings. They're executing every move perfectly, their shields held high, just like he showed them. One trainee shouts for everyone to do exactly as Damien taught them. The instructor admits to himself that he was worried about letting such a young kid take on the role of leader cadet. But Damon has proven himself through sheer ability, managing to produce these results entirely with his own talent. Damien catches a glimpse of the red flag through the chaos. He knows exactly where the enemy leader is hiding and shouts for Kyle to move now. Kyle catches the signal and starts scanning the crowd with a predatory grin, wondering where his target is hiding. He spots the second platoon leader trying to regroup. "Found you," he mutters, looming over the enemy's line. The second platoon leader sees the giant coming for him and panics, desperately calling for his men to forget about attacking and just block him. But the first platoon isn't giving them a chance. Kyle roars for everyone to group up as they prepare to deliver the final blow. Kyle stands his ground, a cocky smirk on his face as he hides behind his sunglasses. He's clearly enjoying himself, already seeing the second platoon as nothing more than foolish bastards. He remains perfectly still, a massive unmoving obstacle in the middle of the field. The second platoon trainees are frozen in confusion, terrified of what this monster might do if they approach. Kyle Wright quote as grin widens. He knows exactly what's about to happen and mocks the opposing team for falling straight into their trap. The opposing trainees are caught completely off guard. They can only stare in shock, the word trap echoing through their panicked minds. Before they can react, Damien uses Kyle's broad shoulders as a launching pad. He gives his teammate a quick word of praise as he kicks off and takes to the air. Damien soars over the second platoon's formation, clutching a flag as he leaps through the sky. He's moving so fast they can't even begin to track him. He lands with a thunderous crash right behind the enemy lines. The force of his descent sending dust and debris flying everywhere. The second platoon leader was flattened by the impact. At that exact moment, the horn blew. The instructors announced that the time limit had been reached and the second platoon had failed to capture the flag. With the match officially over, Damien stands tall and proud, waving the first platoon's red flag high in the air. The courtyard fills with the sound of his teammates' cheers as he declares their victory. The first platoon instructor announces a short break and a switch between offense and defense. After their performance, everyone expects an easy win for them in the competition. Instructor Nilsson is caught off guard by the recruit's speed, but his colleague isn't so sure it'll stay that way. He points a gloved hand across the field, nodding the skill level of the next group. He asks if they might actually be a decent match for the first platoon. On the field, things are looking grim for the fourth platoon. They planned on using this match as a warm-up before facing Damien's squad, but the third platoon is proving to be a nightmare. The trainees are huffing and puffing, frustrated that their opponents won't budge an inch. The Squad 4 leader screams at his men to stick to the plan, but his yelling isn't making them move any faster. One of the trainees snaps back, telling the leader to stop talking and actually get involved from the front. Their teamwork is a total mess, and it's clear they've lost all motivation to keep fighting. On the other side, Appel's teammate suggests they just smash through the tired line immediately. Appel says no, deciding it's better to just hold their ground and wait for the enemy to collapse on their own. The teammate is quick to follow his lead. He can't believe a 14-year-old has such a sharp grasp of the battlefield's flow. It's only been 2 weeks, but he's already realizing Appel isn't an average guy. He orders the rest of the squad to focus on the enemy shieldmen and hold their position. A heavy clash rings out as the two formations slam together. The Squad 4 leader is losing his mind, screaming for the third platoon to quit stalling and just fight. Appel's teammate notes that the fourth platoon has completely run out of steam. One of the defenders is visibly shaking, barely able to keep his shield up. Seeing the opening, the teammate signals the third platoon that it's time to move. The fourth platoon loses its cool and charges out blindly, exactly like Appel wanted. The shields crash together as the formation starts to crumble under the pressure. With the line broken, the teammate calls out for Appel to finish the job. Appel takes off at full speed, sprinting toward the center of the clash. He kicks off an enemy shield, launching himself high into the air. With a massive leap, he flies right over the front line. Mid-air, he readies his spear. Mana swirling around the weapon as he descends. A blue explosion shatters the fourth platoon's defense in a single strike. Their leader can only watch in horror as his entire squad is wiped out in an instant. He admits that if they're getting crushed like this, they don't stand a chance against the first platoon. From the sidelines, Damon's eyes are locked on the field, tracking every move. The match is officially over, and the third platoon is declared the winner. His teammates lift Appel up in celebration, but Damon knows this kid is anything but ordinary. He turns to walk away, fully aware that the real match is going to be in the finals. Damien smirks, his mana flaring up as he looks forward to his clash with Appel. Break time is officially over, and the instructors are calling everyone back to the training grounds. Kyle checks in with Damien. It's finally time for their group battle against the 4th platoon. Damien knows the other team is desperate to score even a single point, but he's not planning on giving them an inch. Kyle is already fired up to smash some faces, specifically whoever insulted Damien earlier. Damien just tells him to focus on clearing a path. Looking at the competition, Damien can see they're already worn out and their coordination is non-existent. He has no intention of going easy on them. He wants this over fast and decisively. The rest of the guys are just as eager to shut up the trash talkers. Damien warns his team to stay sharp because this is going to be over in a heartbeat. Everyone is on the same page and ready to move out. The 1st platoon locks into formation, shields up and spears ready. Across the field, the 4th platoon stands under their blue flag, ready to meet the charge. Damien stares down the Squad 4 leader as the signal sounds to start the fight. Both sides charge in and the training field turns into a chaotic mess. The two formations collide in a cloud of dust. From Damien's perspective, the 4th platoon square formation is even sloppier than he anticipated. He knows he could break them just by running through. He wants to crush their spirits so thoroughly they'll never want to pick up a spear again. Kyle takes point, leading the charge with a massive war cry. He slams into the enemy line like a human wrecking ball. The 4th platoon's defense crumbles instantly as guys are sent flying. Their leader panics, screaming at his men to put some actual strength into their blocks. He's desperate to protect the flag, but his front line is already falling apart. To Damien, every move they make is completely predictable. He easily disarms his opponent, leaving the guy standing there empty-handed. The Squad 4 leader can't believe how quickly he was handled. Damien spins his spear, disappointed that the leader dropped his weapon so easily. He follows up with a brutal kick that sends the leader's head snapping back. Damien pins him down, reminding him that losing your weapon on the battlefield is basically a death sentence. He doesn't pull his punches, delivering a finishing blow with the butt of his spear. The leader is sent reeling from the impact, completely out of the fight. An instructor rushes over to check on the unconscious cadet. Damon just walks away, bored by how easy the whole thing was. With the 4th platoon leader down, the match is officially stopped. The 1st platoon is declared the winner of the group battle. The team erupts in cheers, waving their flag high in victory. Kyle is grinning ear to ear, giving Damien all the credit for the refreshing win. While the losers are carried off, the observers can't stop talking about Damien's insane skill level. They're starting to realize this 13-year-old might actually be more talented than the instructors themselves. Even the senior staff has to admit they've got a genuine monster on their hands, but the mood shifts instantly when a new figure steps onto the grounds. It's the 3rd Division's legendary instructor, Leon Hark Belking, complete with his signature eye patch. Every instructor on site immediately snaps to attention, shouting a formal salute to the living legend. Leonhard Belka, the legendary instructor with the eye patch, points toward the training field and asks if the greenhorn Brian mentioned is that kid. Brian confirms it as the 1st platoon celebrates their victory by tossing Damien into the air. Leon Hark watches with a small smile, finding the boy's presence interesting. Back in the barracks, a cadet bursts through the door, yelling about something insane happening. Damon looks up as the guy explains that a huge VIP just arrived at their training camp. Apparently, it's a famous instructor from the 3rd Division who's basically a living legend. Looking out, the cadet sees all the camp instructors standing perfectly at attention for the guest. Damien asks for a name and the cadet struggles to recall it. Ryan Hart was it, the boy guesses. Damien's eyes widen as the name clicks. He whispers Leon Hark under his breath. The cadet finally remembers the name, but Damon is already on his feet and moving. Without a word, Damon heads for the door, leaving the other cadet completely baffled. He sprints down the hallway, his heart racing at the possibility. He needs to see for himself if his master from his past life is really here. He turns the corner and finds himself face to face with Leon Hark and Brian. Brian is surprised to see him and points him out to the legendary guest. The instructor tells Damien they were actually on their way to find him. Damon doesn't skip a beat, snapping into a perfect military salute and shouting the kingdom's motto. Leonhawk stares him down and asks for confirmation of his name. Damien keeps his cool, thinking about the connection between the 3rd Division and this training camp. It's surreal. He didn't think he'd run into this man until much later in his journey. This is the person who had the single biggest impact on his entire life. He looks at the veteran and internally calls him master. Leonhardt asks again if he's the Damien everyone's talking about. The legend admits he only came because instructor Raymond wouldn't stop praising the kid's talent. Looking closer, Leonhardt notices that the boy has already mastered a solid monocultivation method. He mentions seeing Damien's spear work earlier and asks which unit he's aiming for after graduation. Damon takes a breath, knowing exactly what he has to say. He flashes a confident grin and declares that he wants to join the Neo. Brian Wright, quote, S jaw drops. He can't believe what he just heard. Neocalates isn't just any unit. It's a specialized group under the 3rd Division. Their job is to suppress monsters in the Brincy Forest, making it the deadliest and harshest unit in the military. Leonhardt is genuinely curious why a kid would choose a death squad when most recruits just want a safe desk job. Damon Wright Quote's answer is simple. It's the fastest way for him to become truly strong. Impressed, Leonhardt offers to write him a recommendation for the Knight's Order, a path normally reserved for high-ranking nobles. Brian is nearly hyperventilating at the offer, but Damien politely declines. He explains that his mind is made up. He has to meet someone in that unit, which is why he joined the 3rd Division to begin with. Leonhardt respects the resolve and dismisses him to go get some rest. As soon as Leonhardt turned his back to leave, Brian started panicking, calling Damien an idiot for throwing away a noble's future. He tries to convince the legend that the kid doesn't understand the opportunity he just trashed. Brian tells Leonhardt that Damon is still young and not thinking clearly, begging for a chance to talk some sense into him. But Leonhardt just looks at him and asks if he really thinks a kid with that much conviction isn't capable of making his own choices. Leonhardt Belka can't shake the memory of the look in Damien's eyes, a gaze filled with a terrifyingly calm resolve. He lets out a boisterous laugh, wondering aloud to Brian where such a monster of a kid even came from, especially considering he's only 13. He warns Brian not to meddle with the boy and just let him grow. If he really does join the 3rd Division, their paths will cross soon enough. The very next day, the tension in the training camp reaches a boiling point as the 1st Platoon prepares to face off against the formidable 3rd Platoon. Damien stands before his comrades, his voice steady as he promises that no other platoon in this camp has what it takes to bring them down. Kyle and his teammates wore confident smiles, clearly determined to conquer the challenge ahead. Damien doesn't flinch, a dangerous glint appearing in his eyes as he tells his team to crush their opponents just like they always do. The signal is given and the 3rd Platoon makes the first move, signaling the official start of the high-stakes sparring match. Unite, Damien bellows, his command echoing across the grounds as his squad snaps into position. The 3rd Platoon leader observed the 1st Platoon's formation, realizing they were using the exact same rock-solid formation that had secured their victory yesterday. The 3rd Platoon leader pulls Appel aside, stressing that his specific role is the key to their success today. With a thunderous roar of charge, the 3rd Platoon's shield-bearers sprint forward, their heavy footsteps shaking the earth. The two lines collide with a deafening crash of wood and metal, neither side willing to give an inch. Push them back, Damien roared, trying to use the momentum to shatter the 3rd Platoon's offensive. The front lines become a chaotic mess of shoving and grunting. As trainees struggle to maintain their footing, the 3rd Platoon leader realizes with a start that the 1st Platoon is perfectly countering their pattern from the previous day. Sensing the stalemate, he gives the signal, APL now. Suddenly, the 3rd Platoon's shields part, revealing Appel standing calmly in the center of the opening. Damien's eyes widen in confusion. He can't fathom why they would intentionally create a massive hole in their own formation. Before he can react, Appel is a blur of motion, launching himself forward with incredible speed. With a single devastating strike of his staff, Appel sends a 1st Platoon shield-bearer flying backward as if hit by a battering ram. Damien is momentarily stunned, realizing they've just encountered a force he hadn't accounted for. The 3rd Platoon cheers as they surge toward the gap Appel created, shouting for everyone to push through. But Kyle, the 1st Platoon's powerhouse, steps into the breach with his massive shields, snarling that no one is getting past him. He holds his ground against the onslaught, his raw strength stopping the 3rd Platoon's charge dead in its tracks. Damien breathes a sigh of relief, knowing that only Kyle's intervention saved them from a total collapse. Still, he can't get over Appel's performance. Blowing away a fully braced shield-bearer in one hit is practically unheard of for a recruit. He studies the blonde boy, wondering if he's a monster from the frozen north, and what someone like that is doing in a place like this. Across the line, Appel realizes things are about to get complicated because Kyle has locked onto him and won't let up. In a brief memory of their strategy session, Damien is shown telling Kyle to focus entirely on neutralizing the kid named Appel. Kyle had been confused at the time, not recognizing the name or seeing any immediate threat from the small boy. Damien had simply told him he'd know exactly who he meant the second they finally crossed paths on the field. Back in the heat of battle, a 3rd Platoon teammate asks Appel if he can actually break through Kyle's ironclad defense. Appel grits his teeth, acknowledging that brute force alone won't be enough to topple a mountain like Kyle. There's only one way, Appel mutters as a swirling blue mana begins to coat his staff in a freezing aura. He lunges forward with a spear-like thrust, his weapon glowing with a dangerous ethereal light. Kyle manages to catch the blow on his shields, but the impact is so heavy, it sends a shock wave through his entire body. A cold smirk plays on Appel's lips as he realizes he's found a way to crack the 1st Platoon's strongest shield. Appel leaps high into the air, raining down a relentless barrage of blue energy strikes onto Kyle's guard. Kyle can feel his strength fatting, blood trickling from his mouth, as he wonders how a kid the same age as Damien can possess such monstrous power. The sound of staff against shield is like thunder, as Appel continues his brutal hammer-like assault. Seeing Kyle's stance falter, Appel winds up for one final decisive swing to end the match once and for all. Kyle groans in agony as the sheer force of Appel's man-infused strike rattles his bones and threatens to shatter his heavy shields. Appel continues his relentless aerial assault, his staff glowing with a freezing blue light that sends debris and trainees scattering in every direction. As the blue mana exploded against the wooden barriers, Damon immediately moved to support his teammate, intercepting the blonde kid's attack. Appel catches sight of Damien's unshakable composure and feels a sudden chill that has nothing to do with his own freezing mana. A sharp, piercing whistle suddenly cuts through the chaos, vibrating across the training grounds to signal the end of the round. Kyle drops to one knee, gasping for breath, while Damien stands by his side as the dust of the battle finally begins to settle. The instructor's voice booms over the field, announcing that the third platoon has lost the round for failing to secure the flag within the time limit. Frustration boils over for Appel as he clenches his fist, unable to believe that a simple shield-bearer like Kyle managed to survive his full-power barrage. Damien leans in to check on his teammate, his voice low and concerned as he asks Kyle if he's still in one piece. Kyle tries to act tough, dismissing the concern and insisting he's ready for the next half, despite the obvious tremor in his hands. Damien cuts him off with a stern look, reminding him that pushing himself too far now could prevent him from finishing his training properly. He assigns Kyle a new mission, guarding their flag in the center, a vital role that allows him to recover while still contributing to the team. A faint appreciative smile touches Kyle's lips as he realizes Damien is finding a clever way to protect his pride without benching him entirely. "I won't let them touch it," Kyle vows, planting their red flag firmly in the ground and urging his squad to go and crush their opponents. The instructor commands the platoon to switch positions, calling for the first platoon to prepare for their turn on the offensive. Damien addresses his exhausted comrades, acknowledging their fatigue, but reminding them that this final match will determine their standing. With a terrifyingly focused look, he sets a strict 5-minute deadline to achieve complete victory and secure the enemy's flag. The pressure around Damien intensifies as he prepares to lead the charge, his red eyes burning with the resolve of a seasoned warrior. Across the field, Appel and the third platoon brace themselves, desperate to defend their own flag and reclaim their lost honor. Damien signals the start of the final push, declaring with absolute certainty that they will end the match before the 5 minutes are up. The field is set for the final platoon competition. Two groups of trainees face each other, waiting for the signal to start. Damien stands at the head of his unit, knowing this is his last chance to prove himself before graduation. He's already shown his tactical skills, but now he wants to leave a mark that no instructor can ignore. Leading from the front, he prepares to give them a performance they'll never forget. He wants everyone to remember the name Damien. Across the field, he spots Platoon 3. Taking down Appel S squad is the best way to secure the title of top trainee. Appel is staying back to guard the flag personally, likely because he's drained from the previous rounds. There's no way around it. Damien is going to have to face him head-on. The signal sounds and commands echo across the field. Platoon 1 is ordered to charge while Platoon 3 digs in for defense. Damien doesn't hesitate, telling his team to follow his lead as they go all out from the very start. Platoon 1 hits a wedge formation and charges. The defenders are stunned that they can maintain that speed without breaking rank. The third platoon leader didn't panic, but upon realizing that Damien's unit was on an entirely different level, he immediately ordered his team to tighten their defense. He screams for his men to raise their shields and keep their eyes glued to Damien, but it's too late for a simple shield wall to stop him. Damien channels purple mana into his spear, planning to pierce the line in one go. He leaps into the air and brings the mana-infused spear down with force. The strike punches right through a training shield. The front line collapses as trainees are sent flying by the impact. Damien shouts for his men to keep pushing through the opening he just made. Platoon 3 is in total chaos with their ranks crumbling under the pressure. Desperate to stop the momentum, the defenders try to swarm Damien, but he's moving too fast. He catches an opening and drops another opponent. Platoon 3 tries to regroup, but they can't handle the speed of the assault. More trainees go down, clutching their legs as they're swept off their feet. Damien calls for his platoon to regroup immediately, maintaining their formation even in the thick of the fight. The defenders are stunned. They didn't expect the enemy to reach their rear so quickly. The third platoon leader broke into a cold sweat, wondering how Damien's unit could have covered that much ground in seconds. Appel steps forward, his eyes glowing with blue mana. As he prepares to hold the line, he tells his teammate to stay back and protect the flag while he handles the threat. Even his own squad is shocked. They have to rely on someone so young to save the match. The two geniuses finally came face to face in the middle of the chaotic swirl. Behind the young boy is the shadow of the man he'll become, the future Grand General, Appel Vanstriel. Their spears clash for the first time, sending sparks flying across the battlefield. This is the moment Damien has been waiting for, a chance to test himself against a future legend. Appel is sharp, and Damien realizes the first move was just a feint to test his reactions. He smirks and prepares for the real exchange. Appel doesn't hold back, swinging his spear with a trail of blue mana. The two mana-infused weapons collide, creating a violent burst of energy that shakes the ground. Neither side gives an inch as they lock eyes through the mana flare. Appel stays calm, but he's clearly focused on the threat in front of him. Damien grips his spear tighter, demanding that his rival takes this fight seriously. He leaps into an attack, ready to use every bit of power he has to bring down the future general right here. Appel lunges forward with blue mana, but he's sweating and wittied, clearly feeling the pressure of the duel. Damien isn't backing down, swinging his spear as it crackles with intense purple energy. The impact was so powerful it nearly shattered Appel's weapon instantly, leaving him completely unable to counterattack. He watches Damien move, unable to believe a commoner could possess such refined mana control and strength. He wonders if Damien is actually hiding his true identity, questioning how a trainee could have this much skill. To him, Damien feels like an immovable wall, a force of nature that shouldn't exist in a simple training camp. Damien keeps the pressure on, telling his rival it's time to end their duel. He unleashes a final strike, certain that Appel has nothing left to block it with. The blow connects perfectly, sending Appel staggering back from the sheer force. He collapsed to the ground, his spear shattered and his strength completely spent. He can only grunt in frustration as he lies in the dust, defeated. Damien lands gracefully, having secured the opening he needed for his team to win. Appel looks over at the goal with a curse, realizing he failed to protect the flag. The blue flag waves high, signaling the end of the final platoon competition. Damien raises the banner with a victory shout as Platoon 1 is declared the winners of the training cycle. Appel stares at the ground in silence, processing the loss. Damien walks over to the fallen boy, showing no sign of his earlier aggression. He offers a hand and tells him it was a great fight. Though Appel is already promising to win the next one, Damien just smiles and suggests that next time maybe they should be fighting on the same side instead. Damien admits he doesn't think he could survive a second round against someone like Appel. Anyway, Appel nudges Damien and tells him to stop being so humble about his overwhelming win. Damien knows that beating a future legend like Appel now might just push the boy to become even stronger in the future. For the moment, he decides to just enjoy the victory, along with the rest of his platoon. The battle is over, and Platoon 1 celebrates their hard-earned win in the center of the field. Leonhardt observed them from behind, his expression one of satisfaction as he saw how much the recruits had grown. He decides to let them savor the moment before the reality of their next training phase sets in. The reward for their victory is better than they expected. A massive feast served right in the mess hall. The trainees can't believe their luck as they dig into plates of steak and roast chicken, making the competition feel worth the effort. Damien watches his teammates stuff their faces, amused by how quickly their exhaustion vanished at the sight of meat. He looks around the room, disappointed that Leonhardt has already left before they could finish their conversation. One of the instructors pulls up a chair and asks if he can join the top graduate for his meal. He gets right to the point, asking if Damien is really going to stick to his choice and reject Leonhardt's offer to join the Night Order. The instructor thinks it's a massive waste of a rare opportunity, but he can see Damien's mind is already made up. He smirks and asks Damien if he's heard the news about the other top trainees yet. He reveals that Appel was also offered a prestigious position within the Night Order. Damien isn't surprised, simply stating that Appel is free to live his own life and he'll respect whatever the boy chooses. The instructor laughs, calling Damien a boring kid for being so mature about everything. He realizes there's no way he can convince Damien to change his mind about the Night Order, so he drops the subject. He stands up and calls for everyone's attention, silencing the rowdy mess hall. He raises his glass to the trainees, acknowledging the hard work they've put in over the past 2 weeks. He reminds them that training starts again first thing tomorrow, so they better enjoy their rest while they can. He leads a final toast to the kingdom as the entire hall raises their glasses in unison. Time flew by quickly, bringing the recruits to the third and final week of their grueling training. The instructors shout for them to thrust harder and move faster, pushing them to their absolute limits in the heat of the day. Damien notices a shift in the air. The recruits' attitudes have definitely changed for the better. It's not just his own squad. The entire third training camp seems revitalized, likely spurred on by the recent squad competition. An instructor finally calls for a 5-minute break, giving the exhausted trainees a moment to breathe. Kyle approaches Damien, wiping sweat from his brow and looking like he has some gossip to share. He mentions how the 4th platoon's morale has been completely shot since the squad competition, leading to an insane dropout rate. He laughs at how their squad leader Billet the competition ended, calling the whole situation pathetic. Damien cuts him off, reminding him that there are more important things to worry about than their rivals' failures. He points out that while they won the squad competition, they still need to focus on their individual scores for the final ranking. Everyone here has their sights set on a good placement, especially if they want to get into the royal palace. He asks if they're all aiming for the same goal that most commoner recruits dream of. He's talking about the position of palace administrative soldier, the ultimate cushy assignment for any recruit. But with only 30 spots available for 160 recruits, the odds are slim from the very start. Even then, the internal competition is so cutthroat that only a third of those applicants will actually get the job. Kyle laughs, nodding that everyone probably enlisted for the exact same reason, so the fight for those spots is bound to be fierce. Then it clicks for him, and he grabs Damien, asking if he's also gunning for a royal administrative position. Damien looks at him with a deadpan expression and says he isn't going to the royal palace. Kyle is baffled, asking why Damon would pass up a spot he could easily get with his high scores. Damien asks him if he really thinks a job as a royal administrative soldier would suit someone like him. He points out that if he got the position, he'd be cooped up inside the palace all day long. Kyle stops to consider it, admitting that such a life would indeed feel a bit suffocating for someone like them. He looks at Damien, realizing the boy has a point about not being built for a desk job. Damien tells him to forget it, joking that a guy like him wouldn't last a month before running for the exit. Anyway, he teases Kyle further, saying he likes throwing his weight around too much and would die of boredom in the palace. Kyle is curious now and asks Damien where he actually plans on going after they leave the training camp. Damien gives him a straight answer. He's planning on joining the Neocal. The announcement hits the surrounding recruits like a lightning bolt, leaving them witty-eyed and stunned. Kyle shouts in disbelief, asking if Damon is thinking of the same Neocalet as everyone else and wondering if he's lost his mind. Before he can cause any more of a scene, Damien delivers a swift kick to shut him up. Kyle recovers quickly, laughing from the ground as Damon looks down at him with a smirk. He calls Damien an absolutely massive crazy bastard, but admits that's exactly why he likes him. Their brief rest is over as the instructors call for training to resume, nodding they're now down one strong candidate for the administrative positions. A month of hard work finally culminates in a formal assembly in the courtyard. Damien looks up at the sky, thinking it feels like they only just enlisted yesterday. The company commander stands on the stage, addressing the crowd with a calm and professional demeanor. She tells them she'll be cheering for their future endeavors and hopes they continue to contribute to the kingdom. The first platoon instructor barks an order for everyone to salute the company commander. The discharge ceremony comes to its final phase as the commander prepares to announce the results of their training. The top 5 trainees are about to be revealed, and the air is thick with anticipation and nerves. Damien is called out first as the leader of Squad 1, taking the top spot with a wide triumphant grin. Next up is Appel from Squad 3, who steps forward to join Damien. As the recruits look on, the top 5 trainees are revealed. Kyle, Gerard, and a recruit named Alex are honored alongside the top 2, Damien and Appel. The unnamed instructor tells the group to follow him, explaining that their reward is a single piece of equipment of their choice from the armory. Outside the heavy armory doors, the instructor sets the order of entry, telling Damien that as the top-ranked recruit, he will go in first. Damien steps into the armory with a small, knowing smile, certain that this is the moment he's been waiting for. He looks around the dimly lit room, noting how well organized the various weapons and supplies are. He briefly examines some potions on a shelf, but his mind is elsewhere, wondering if there are any hidden treasures here that he doesn't know about yet. He decides not to linger and waste time. His goal is specific, and he intends to grab it and leave as quickly as possible. He walks deeper into the armory, his eyes focused on a specific spot as if he's following a map only he can see. Reaching up to a high shelf, he finds exactly what he was looking for, a look of triumph crossing his face. He holds up a ring, recalling a tip from a subordinate in his past life about this powerful artifact being hidden in this very camp. It is a ring that can cast a brief invisibility spell when infused with mana, a tool far more valuable than any sword or spear here. As he exits, Damien thinks to himself that the other recruits would never have noticed the ring's value since none of them know how to use mana yet. With Damien's turn over, the instructor signals for Appel to be the next one to enter the armory. Damien watches the blonde boy go, remembering that in his past life, Appel was the one who had originally claimed the invisibility ring. He knows Appel's innate Mona sense would have led him straight to it, and he finds himself curious about what the boy will choose instead. He keeps a close eye on the door, eager to see what kind of destiny choice Appel is about to make. Appel returns much sooner than expected, stepping out of the armory with a calm and stoic expression. Damien is caught off guard by the speed of it, wondering if the boy had already decided on his prize before even walking in. Kyle notices Damon's intense stare and asks him what's wrong, but Damon simply shakes it off, claiming it's nothing. His gaze remains fixed on the small silver object in Appel's hands, realizing with a start that there's no mistake about what it is. It is a seal bearing the crest of a kingdom that fell into ruin long ago, a powerful relic in its own right. Looking at Appel, Damien finally understands. The boy's connection to that fallen kingdom must be the reason he already knows how to use mana. Brian gathers the top trainees and asks if everyone managed to pick a reward from the armory. Appel shows off a silver seal, admitting he only grabbed it because he felt a faint divine power coming from it. The instructor chuckles, explaining that the seal is actually an artifact meant to ward off misfortune. He looks over the other gear, praising a solid-looking spear and a shield crafted by a famous artisan named Walter. Then he turns to Damien, still clearly unsure about why the top graduate picked such a plain item. He explains that the silver ring only provides a minor weight reduction, but Damien doesn't seem disappointed at all. Damien just nods and slips the ring onto his finger to test it out. As soon as he starts moving, he realizes his body feels significantly lighter, allowing him to move with incredible speed. Brian asks how it feels, and Damien admits it's actually much better than he expected. He knows the truth, though. It's an air rank artifact with weight reduction and invisibility, making it a total steal. With the camp coming to an end, the instructor tells them it's time to head back and apply for their official postings. Back at the barracks, the graduates sit down to fill out their final deployment forms. Without a second thought, Damien writes down the Neocalit's unit as his chosen destination. Brian watches him, thinking what a waste it is for such a talent to skip the prestigious night order. Damien hands over his application, finalizing his decision once and for all. The instructor accepts it, but gives him one last warning about just how dangerous the front lines really are. Damien just thanks him for the concern, his mind already made up. Brian gives him a pat on the shoulder, acknowledging all the hard work the kid has put in over the past month. The door clicks shut as Damon leaves the office for the last time. He feels a bit bittersweet about moving on, but his thoughts are interrupted by someone calling out his name. It's Appel who comes rushing down the hallway to catch him before he leaves. He asks why Damon is skipping the night order when he clearly has the skills, but Damon just says it's not where he belongs. Appel reveals he's heading to the order himself, backed by a recommendation from their instructor. Damien tells him it's a wise choice and that he's sure Appel will do great things there. Appel finds it funny that the guy rejecting the job calls it a wise move, calling Damien completely unpredictable. He warns him that Neokal is basically a suicide squad and tells him to make sure he stays alive. The two rivals share a firm handshake, promising to meet each other again down the line. Damon gives him a small smile and thanks him. He watches Appel walk away, wondering if the guy has any idea what his future actually holds. In the distant future, this kid becomes the Grand General of the Baroque Kingdom, a total monster on the battlefield. Damien's looking forward to seeing him reach that level again. With that settled, he decides to head over and say goodbye to the rest of the crew. He walks into the dormitory one last time. Kyle spots him instantly and comes charging over like a madman. The big guy grabs him, complaining that he thought Damien was going to ghost them without a word. Kyle gives him a devious grin, hinting that they'll be seeing each other much sooner than Damien thinks. Then he gathers everyone's attention so their platoon leader can give a final farewell speech. Damien keeps it simple, thanking them for following his lead and wishing them all luck at their new units. The whole room erupts in cheers, wishing Damien the best of luck as well. Later that day, Damien grabs his pack and starts walking out of the training grounds, but before he can get far, someone calls out to him from behind. He stops and turns back, wondering who else could be looking for him now. Dial, the merchant's daughter, greets Damien with a bright, welcoming smile. She gets straight to the point, presenting the documents that detail exactly how his investment funds were used. Based on the terms Damien proposed, she's projecting a solid 3% return on their net revenue. Damien looks over the breakdown, genuinely impressed by how professionally she organized everything. Dial tells him to feel free to ask if he has any questions about the report. But after seeing such a thorough job, Damon admits he doesn't have any more questions. He tells her to proceed with the current plan and mentions that more funds will be arriving under his name soon. When she brings up the detailed contract, Damien stops her, saying it won't be necessary. He explains that contracts are only for people who expect trouble, and he trusts her to handle things on her own. Dial looks at him in shock, clearly taken aback by how unique he is compared to other investors. Damon slides a heavy, ornate box across the table, calling it the promised investment funds. Dial's eyes go wide the moment she sees what's inside the chest. The original deal was for 300 gold, but she realizes there's easily over 500 sitting there. Damien tells her it's just a token of his appreciation for the sincerity she's shown him. Panicking slightly, Dial says she needs to revise the contract amount immediately to match this new investment. Damien smiles, thinking about how most people would have just dismissed a kid his age, yet she treated him like a pro. Dial asks about his deployment, assuming he'll be heading to his main unit soon. Damien closes his eyes and tells her he's heading west to join the Neocalit's unit near the forest. Dial is horrified, asking if he really volunteered to go to a place that everyone considers a death trap. Damien just smirks and jokes that if he dies, the entire investment will just belong to her guild. Dial doesn't find the humor in it at all, giving him a cold, stern look as she tells him not to say things like that. Damien notes to himself that while she's usually sweet, she can definitely be sharp when she wants to be. She asks for his departure date, and he tells her he's leaving in 3 days. Dial stands up to leave, promising to put the gold he's provided to excellent use. As she heads out the door, Damon feels relieved that the investment issue is finally settled for now. With 3 days left before he's stuck in the woods, he decides to eat and drink as much as possible. He spends the next few days hitting the local taverns and enjoying every bit of the freedom he has left. He moves through the market, sampling all the local street food he can get his hands on. By the end of it, he's passed out contentedly on a stone bench in the middle of town. When the day finally arrives, Damien checks his map and prepares to head out of town. He makes sure everything he needs is packed and gets ready to leave civilization behind. He suddenly senses something and turns around to see who's approaching him in the woods. Kyle walks out from behind the trees with a massive grin. Already geared up for a long journey, Damien stares at him, completely surprised that the big guy actually showed up. Kyle claps him on the back, telling him that their bond isn't just going to end with training camp. He reveals that he applied for the Neocal unit as well, so they'll be heading to the front together. The two of them start their long trek through the forest, heading toward their new unit, but they're suddenly stopped by a loud shout from someone behind them. Dial comes running toward them, looking completely out of breath. Damien asks what would bring her all the way out here into the middle of nowhere. She reveals that she's arranged a carriage for their trip since Neocal is so far away. She even made sure it was fully stocked with rations and all the supplies they might need. Dial tells Damien to consider the carriage, a way of repaying the kindness he showed her family in the past. She explains that her guild always honors its debts and that she spent the last 2 days working tirelessly to secure this for him. As the two boys prepare to depart, Dial gives them a sincere look and tells them to stay safe out there. Damien reflects on her promise of future support, finding her determination to be quite a significant investment. He lets out a laugh, thinking that while she might be a terrible liar, she's certainly more interesting than he anticipated. Damon and Kyle head off as Dial bows politely, wishing Damon well on the dangerous road ahead. Damien steps up into the carriage, finally ready to leave the training grounds behind for good. Dial stands by the side of the trail, watching as the luxury carriage rattles away toward the distant horizon. The carriage bumps and sways along the rough mountainous terrain leading toward the kingdom's frontier. Inside, Kyle is already struggling with motion sickness, making Damien realize that walking would have been a complete nightmare. They finally reach Urkel, and the sight of the heavily fortified garrison confirms they've arrived at their destination. Leaning back, Damien notices the lack of townspeople and wonders why the streets seem so empty of locals. He recalls that most people in Urkel spend their time deep in the Brinserian forest foraging for a rare herb. The herb called a mancho is highly toxic and causes severe illness if it isn't processed with extreme care. However, it's also a vital base for painkillers, forcing the locals to risk their lives in the forest to meet the kingdom's demand. Damien hops down from the carriage and tells a hesitant Kyle that it's time for them to head toward the base. They walk through the silent, gloomy streets of the fortress town, where the atmosphere feels heavy and unwelcoming. Kyle looks around at the dilapidated state of the surroundings, feeling a growing sense of unease about the place. The massive dark stone walls of the garrison loom over them, looking old and poorly maintained. Damien observes the crumbling architecture, thinking that a single touch might be enough to bring the whole thing down. Suddenly, Damien's expression sharpens as he catches a familiar and unsettling scent on the wind, the smell of blood. Kyle calls out to him, but Damon keeps his focus ahead, sensing that someone is quickly approaching them. A group of soldiers slowly emerges from the fog further down the main thoroughfare of the outpost. They are a squad of wounded men returning from the front lines, looking utterly defeated and battered. Damien catches sight of the Neocalit's emblem on their gear, identifying them as part of the vanguard unit. He stands silently by the side of the road, watching as the weary, injured soldiers limp past them toward the barracks. The group disappears into the darkness of the fortress, leaving behind a heavy trail of grim silence. Kyle is visibly shaken by the ghostly expressions on the soldiers' faces, but Damon just lets out a tired sigh. Damien tells Kyle that he'll have to get used to it, as the people here fight to the death every single day. As Damien looks at the fortress gate, a vivid memory from his past life as Leonhardt unexpectedly resurfaces. In that past life, he once stood before a line of trainees and asked them what they considered a soldier's most important duty. The men shouted out typical answers, boasting about crushing enemies or dying in a blaze of glory. Leonhardt listened to their reckless enthusiasm with a look of silent, stern disappointment. He suddenly delivered a sharp blow to one trainee head, cutting through the shouting and catching everyone off guard. He told them their answers were the worst possible ones they could have given and ordered them to listen closely. With a cold, piercing gaze, he told them the only correct answer was not dying, that survival was the priority. He drilled into them that they only strive to get stronger so they don't have to die, and demanded to know if they understood. In the present, Damien smirks sadly as he thinks about those faces, remembering that despite his words, they all ended up dead anyway. Damien tells a hesitant Kyle that it's time to move inside, but Kyle is frozen by the oppressive atmosphere of the camp. Damon turns back with a look of cold determination, reminding Kyle that they came here specifically to get stronger. Kyle pleads for a moment to breathe, feeling completely overwhelmed by the dark vibe within the fortress walls. Ignoring the hesitation, Damon starts walking toward the inner gate, leaving Kyle to hurry and catch up. Kyle shouts for Damien to wait as they disappear into the dark, ominous archway of the fortress gate. Inside the barracks, the heavy silence is broken by the sound of gear being slammed down onto a wooden crate in frustration. A battle-worn soldier vents his rage, shouting about how they were blindsided by 30 orcs and a mage when they were promised an easy mission. Nearby, two men discuss the grim condition of a comrade named Charleston, whose arm was nearly lost during the ambush. For the men of the Neocalites unit, marked by the NEO insignia, the concept of a discharge is nothing but a myth. These soldiers are given the grim choice between rotting away in a dark prison cell or serving out their days in this dangerous hellhole. They are ground down by the endless fighting in Neocal, knowing they will eventually be discarded like broken tools once they can no longer fight. One man shouts in despair, knowing that a permanent injury would leave him with no way to make a living in the world outside these walls. Commander Terran, a stocky man with messy brown hair and a distinct scar on his left cheek, steps into the room and immediately calls for a healer. His subordinate hesitates, pointing out that the high costs of a priest from the temple would bankrupt the entire unit's meager salaries. Without hesitation, Terran drops a heavy sack containing 20 gold coins on a bed, ordering it to be used for the medical expenses. A scarred soldier looks on in disbelief, knowing that Terran had been saving that exact amount for his own mother's urgent surgery. Terran brushes it off with a weary smile, claiming his mother's condition has improved, and she doesn't need the money right away. Inspired by their leader's selflessness, the other soldiers begin digging into their own pockets to offer whatever they have. Diana, a young rookie with silver-white hair and blue-gray eyes, shyly steps forward with a few coins to contribute. The scarred soldier barks at him to get back, telling the kid to save his money to replace his own worn-out boots. Diana looks down at his hands, his voice trembling as he insists on helping because he blames himself for Charleston's injury. While the veteran continues to grumble at the admirable little a circumflex, Terran looks on moved by the unit's unexpected solidarity. As the silver-haired rookie runs off to carry out the commander's orders, Terran watches him go and asks him his age. Deanna quickly replies that he is 18, prompting Terran to realize it's already been a year since the boy joined them. Terran walks away, his thoughts lingering on the wounded Charleston until someone calls out to him from the doorway. A soldier rushes in with a sense of urgency, announcing that the new recruits have finally arrived at the outpost. The veterans in the room turn their focus toward the entrance, their eyes gleaming with a sharp predatory intensity. Terran looks back with a tired but steady gaze, having completely forgotten about the new arrivals amidst the chaos of the recent battle. Terran calls out to Diana, resting a hand on the young soldier's shoulder. The kid snaps to attention immediately. Terran pulls him along, telling him it's time to move. The commander cracks a weary smile, letting Diana know it's time to go meet their new juniors. Damon and Kyle report to the unit commander's office. Terran looks up from his desk, asking if they're the new meat that just arrived. The commander sizes them up. He notes that Kyle at least looks like he's got a solid, capable build. Terran narrows his eyes as he checks the registration documents. Something doesn't add up. He double-CH checks Damon's age, 13. The kid is barely a teenager. Damon stands firm while the commander realizes the boy is 5 years younger than their current youngest member. He can't fathom why a child would volunteer for a suicide squad like this. Terran tosses the paper aside with a sigh. He really doesn't get what's going through kids' heads these days. Kyle tries to back him up, mentioning that Damien graduated top of his class. Terran isn't impressed. He leans forward, resting his chin on his gloved hands. Training camp is a playground compared to the hellhole they've just entered. Damien just nods, saying he already knows the score. Terran stares him down, wondering why he still showed up. The commander calls for Diana, who immediately snaps to attention. Taryn points toward the door. He tells Diana to take the new recruits, get them settled in, and then put them to work cleaning the place. Diana turns and heads out, giving the rookies a cold "follow me." They walk through the stone halls of the base, their boots echoing on the floor. Diana starts explaining the rules. In Neocalit's standard military ranks are worthless. Forget about platoon leaders and titles. He lists the hierarchy. There's the unit commander and the vice commander, that's it. Seniority is purely about who has survived the longest. He kicks open the door to the barracks. The room is a mess. Deanna tells them to grab any locker they want, adding that they won't be using them for long anyway. Kyle stops him, confused by the cryptic comment. He wants to know what Diana means by that. Diana turns back with a shadowed gaze. He's been here for a year, and he's still the youngest senior in the unit. Kyle looked like he was about to protest, but Damon immediately kicked him, causing him to clutch his shin in pain. Sweat beads on Kyle's forehead as he starts to realize the grim reality of this place. Diana spells it out for them. Every single recruit who came after him is dead. That's why he's still the most junior of the veterans. The rookies are left standing in the heavy silence of the barracks. Diana leaves them to it, ordering them to unpack and start cleaning. He'll deal with the rest later. They're left alone in the middle of the dusty room. It's a lot to process. Kyle is fuming over the guy's attitude. He turns around and sees Damien actually holding back a laugh. Kyle snaps at him, asking why he's smiling after a speech like that. Damon just shrugs it off. Damon looks around the familiar, rundown environment. To him, it feels like nothing has changed from his past life. He grabs a broom and tells Kyle it's time to start cleaning. Kyle stares at him like he's grown a second head. Damon is dead serious. He says if they're going to do a job, they might as well do it right. He flashes a wide grin, calling this their very first mission. He shoves a rag into Kyle's face, telling him to clean it until the floor is spotless. Kyle isn't having it, yelling that he's a soldier, not a janitor. Later that evening, Deanna sits alone at the military store, lost in his own thoughts. He closes his eyes. The cycle of the unit is starting to get to him. He remembers how it always goes. New faces arrive. If you get to know them and you grow attached, he thinks back to another rookie on his first mission. Diana had been the confident senior, telling the kid to just watch and learn. He'd even assured the guy the enemy was weak and told him to stay in the back for safety. But on this battlefield, one tiny mistake is all it takes. The rookie was dead before Diana could even react. That's just life in Neocalids. It's a place where survival is the only thing that matters. After that, he stopped caring. He convinced himself the new guys were all going to die anyway, so why bother getting to know them? But for some reason, these new recruits are stuck in his head, especially that red-haired kid. He can't shake the feeling that Damien looked at him like they were old friends. A shopkeeper breaks his train of thought, telling him his shoe repair is finally done. Deanna finishes up at the counter, dropping some silver and thanking the shopkeeper for the service. The shopkeeper casually mentions seeing some clueless-looking idiots hanging around the unit earlier and asks if they're the new recruits. He keeps going, saying they looked so hopeless he thought they were just new guardsmen. Diana just gives him a blank stare, clearly not here for the chatter. He bows his head and heads for the exit, saying he'll be back another time. As he walks through the base, he thinks about the juniors. He's already deciding that he needs to crush their spirits the moment he gets back. In his mind, confidence and pride are just quick ways to end up in a grave in a place like this. He reaches the barracks door, muttering that they probably didn't even manage to do the cleaning right. He slides the door open and freezes, his eyes wide in absolute disbelief. Damien is standing there with a bright smile, looking a little dusty, but completely unbothered. Room behind him is glowing. It's not just clean, it's sparkling from floor to ceiling. The other veterans are just as shocked. They corner Diana, asking him exactly how hard he rode the new guys to get the place looking like a palace. Deanna is sweating, stammering out that he didn't really do anything as he tries to process what he's seeing. Damien holds up a bucket, happily reporting that the cleaning is done and asking if they missed any spots. Usually recruits just fake it when they're told to clean. Deanna wonders if this is some kind of legendary high-level passive-aggressive rebellion. He stares at the kid trying to figure out if he's being mocked or if Damien is actually just that diligent. Suddenly, a loud, deep laugh erupts from behind them. It's the commander. Taryn is actually laughing, calling the place impressive and saying it looks brand new. The veterans are completely stunned. Taryn is famous for never showing emotion, yet here he is losing it over a clean room. Taryn calms down and signals for the two recruits to come over to him. He looks at the sparkling floor and asks if the two of them really managed to do all of this themselves. His expression turns serious. He asks why they went through so much effort when they could have just pretended to work. Damien answers without hesitation. They were simply following the instructions their senior gave them. Taryn goes quiet, sizing them up. After years on the battlefield, he's learned how to gauge a person's potential at a glance. He looks at the big guy, Kyle, and thinks he could be a powerhouse with just a little bit of combat training. But when he looks at Damien, he gets nothing. He can't understand why a top graduate would choose to come to a place like this. He figures there must be a reason. but for now, he calls out for everyone to listen up. The rest of the squad turns to face him as he stands between the two newcomers. He introduces Damien and Kyle as the newest members of the unit and tells the veterans to make them feel welcome. Later that night, things finally settle down. Damien looks content while Kyle is grinning like he's ready for anything. Damien finds himself drifting into a memory. In another life, he and Diana were lying in their bunks when Diana asked when the war would end. Back then, Damien's only answer was that it would end if they surrendered. Diana didn't take the bait. He just told Damien that he wasn't allowed to die before him. Damien had brushed it off as random nonsense at the time, wondering what he'd eaten to make him say that. In the present, Damien lies in his bunk with a faint smile. He never gave an answer, but in a way he did keep that promise. The memory turns dark. He sees Diana again, but this time he's riddled with swords on a muddy battlefield. Damien sees Nero as the tragic end of his previous comrade flashes before him. He remembers the final moments of that life, outliving Diana just like he was told to. The weight of the memory is too much. Damien snaps awake, staring at the ceiling and cursing his own mind. He sits up knowing there's no way he's getting back to sleep now. He decides to head out and work on his mana cultivation instead. He slips out of the barracks and makes his way into the dark woods surrounding the base. He stops when he hears the sound of a blade whistling through the air. He wonders who else would be out training in the middle of the night. He peers through the brush and sees Diana, focused and sweating, swinging his sword with everything he's got. Damien watches Diana from the shadows of the forest, thinking that his old comrade was a total training nut even back in their previous life. He notices Diana leaning heavily on his oversized sword, catching his breath. Damien knows that weapon is a terrible fit because it completely negates Diana's greatest strength, his speed. He remembers it took forever for Diana to finally switch weapons in the past, too. He decides to stay quiet for now, figuring that if he butts in, he'll probably just get a fist to the face. With a small smirk, he turns and walks back toward the barracks. There's no point in throwing away the tiny bit of goodwill he's managed to build up just yet. He'll find a better time to mention it. The next morning, the squad is assembled at the base of a jagged, rocky mountain range. One of the veterans groans at the sight, complaining that the place looks more miserable every time he sees it. Another soldier, leaning back with a lazy grin, suggests they make things interesting. He wants to place a bet on whether the new recruits can even make it to the end of the day's training. A small crowd gathers as silver coins are tossed into waiting palms. They're betting on how soon the newbies will pass out, with some putting down 20 silver on them, failing before the morning drills are even over. Nearby, Kyle is fuming, his face turning a deep shade of red as he hears them talking about him like he's a piece of entertainment. Damien, however, just stares at them with a cold, analytical gaze. Damien thinks to himself that the mood in this unit is absolutely rotten. The veterans are so used to the cycle of death that they don't even see the new recruits as fellow soldiers, and nobody steps in to stop the gambling. Instead of getting angry, Damien starts walking toward the group of betting veterans. Kyle calls out after him, confused about where he's going. Damien stops right in front of the soldiers and asks if he can join in on the fun, catching them all completely off guard. The veterans erupt in surprised laughter, unable to believe the recruit they were just mocking is actually showing his face. They ask if the rookie has money to burn. Damien calmly confirms that he does, but adds that he'd like to make a few small adjustments to the terms of the bet. He flips a single gold coin into the air, the metal catching the sunlight as he catches it. He announces that he's putting down 1 gold on himself, beating everyone present and taking first place in today's training. The group goes silent for a heartbeat, eyes fixed on the gold coin in the young man's hand. One of the soldiers breaks the silence with a smirk, admitting that the kid has some serious guts. He agrees to the terms. If Damien manages to beat them all, he can take the entire pot of coins they've gathered, but he sets his own price for failure. If Damien loses, he has to spend the next month running every single errand they can think of. He tells the boy to back out now if he doesn't have the balls for it. Damien doesn't flinch, but he has one final condition he wants to add to the wager. He tells them that if he wins, he wants to be granted free time during training hours for an entire month. The soldiers start to protest, calling the request completely ridiculous. "You've got a deal," a voice booms. Taran has approached the group unnoticed, and he agrees to the rookie's terms with a stern nod. The commander then turns his attention toward Diana, who is standing off to the side watching the exchange. With a sharp, challenging grin, Taran informs Diana that he's part of this bet now, too. Taran taunts him, asking if he's worried about losing his pride and his money to Heir Jr. Diana lets out a frustrated sigh. Looking away, he claims he isn't worried. He just doesn't like the idea of throwing money away on a result that's already obvious. Taran laughs and says he'll cover Diana's stake himself, effectively forcing the silver-haired soldier into the competition. He looks back at Damien, confirming that if he truly outperforms his seniors, he'll get exactly what he asked for. As the commander walks away, the veterans start whispering again, looking Damien up and down. They think the kid looks weak and dried up, and they can't understand why he was even sent to the field. They are fired up now, determined to crush the cocky newcomer's pride. They tell him he better give it everything he's got because they won't be holding back. Damien bows his head respectfully, though secretly he's satisfied that everything is going exactly as he planned. This isn't just about winning some free time. He looks at the soldiers around him and thinks that he needs to shake up this unit. They've let themselves rot away, hiding behind the excuse that they could die at any moment. He knows that living day by day without any sense of hope doesn't just destroy the individual, it eventually poisons everyone around them. Terran's voice cuts through the air again, officially announcing the start of the stamina training session. He points toward a stack of heavy timber nearby. Today's task is simple. They each have to carry a log all the way to the top of the rocky hill. The veterans immediately start yelling in protest, arguing that this isn't part of their normal routine. They demand that only the rookies should have to do such a brutal drill. Terran doesn't want to hear it. He screams at them to shut up, grab a log, and start moving, warning that he won't tolerate any slacking. Grudgingly, the soldiers hoist the heavy logs onto their shoulders and begin the grueling ascent up the steep, jagged terrain. As they climb, the veterans are already huffing and puffing, their faces strained with effort. One of them wonders aloud why the captain is suddenly changing the training style. High above them, Terran stands on a rocky outcrop with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the men struggling below. A soldier mutters that this is clearly meant to test the rookies, and that they'll probably fold and quit before they're even halfway up. He pauses to catch his breath and looks back down the slope, asking his comrades where the red-haired rookie went. His eyes widen in shock as he looks further up the trail. Damien is already far ahead of the entire group, sprinting up the treacherous rocks with the log on his shoulder as if it weighed nothing at all. Damon lets out a soft breath as he reaches the peak, his muscles barely even strained despite the heavy load. He glances down at the magic ring on his finger, realizing that the artifact's weight reduction properties actually apply to everything he's carrying, not just his own equipment. He grins to himself, satisfied with the unexpected bonus of his purchase. The ring has made a grueling task feel almost like a light stroll. Standing at the edge of the rocky summit, he looks back down the winding trail, searching for the rest of his squad. He sees that the majority of the soldiers are still struggling far below, their progress slowed to a crawl by the steep incline and the heavy logs. He notes that there's only one person even remotely close to his position. It's Diana, who is huffing with exertion as he hauls his timber upward, his brow drenched in sweat and his expression one of grim determination. Damien watches as Diana finally nears the top, acknowledging that his former comrade is indeed as skilled as he remembered. He knows the silver-haired soldier will be joining him at the peak in just a few more moments. Diana's eyes narrow with intensity as he focuses on the final few steps of the climb, his blue gaze reflecting the sheer effort he's putting into the task. Damien's smile widens as he waits. He had expected Diana to be at the top of his class at the training camp, but seeing him push himself like this confirms his potential. He sets his own log down firmly on the ground, signaling the end of his run. Damien stands tall at the summit, announcing his victory with a casual confidence that hides the unfair advantage his magic ring provided. He has won first place by a massive margin. Terran watches from a few paces away, his arms crossed over his chest. He's genuinely surprised by the rookie's performance, never imagining that even a talent like Diana would be beaten so soundly. The commander looks at the young man, realizing that Damien might be even more useful to the unit than he initially expected. Behind him, Diana finally reaches the top and slumps against his log, completely exhausted. Terran raises his voice, his command echoing across the mountaintop as he officially ends the training session for everyone. Below them, the remaining soldiers collapse in relief. Suddenly, one of the veterans points toward the base, his voice cracking with alarm as he calls out to the captain. Terran turns, his brow furrowing in confusion. The soldier shouts for everyone to look toward the main building of the base, his expression one of pure terror. Terran's posture instantly stiffens as he follows the man's pointing finger. From the highest point of the barracks, a bright red flag has been hoisted and is flapping violently in the wind. Terran's eyes widen in realization. It's the signal for a level 1 emergency, an alert that means the unit is under immediate and dire threat. The soldiers begin to gather rapidly in front of the large stone gate of the dark fortress. The commander asks irritably about the reason for the alert and receives the news of losses in the Bronzy Lea forest. He wants to know who the victims are and discovers that they are gatherers in a forbidden area of the woods. The official complains about the civil disobedience and questions what creature caused the attack in the dangerous forest. He is surprised that no one knows the type of monster. Even though the group was with 6 mercenaries, the commander asks how many men are ready and hears that only 70 soldiers can march right away. He orders to exclude the lightly wounded to gather 50 elite warriors as quickly as possible. He reflects worriedly that the outings are frequent and wonders if the forest is undergoing changes. The warriors stand firmly in the garrison yard, responding promptly to the call to combat. The commander tells everyone to brandish their weapons when he hears hurried footsteps coming in his direction. Demian and his giant partner step forward before the group, stating that they also intend to go on the mission. The leader refuses immediately, saying that real combat is different and orders them to stay at the barracks. The rookies argue that they can act by carrying the loads in the rear. Thanks to their excellent stamina, the experienced leader closes his eyes, limiting the situation of needing to accept the help of new recruits. He accepts on the strict condition that they stay only in the rear carrying the extra equipment. The commander orders Dional to hand over all the extra baggage to the two rookies to begin the march. Dional passes the supplies to Demian, who begins to reflect on the terrible events of that forest. Diana reveals in a very tense and serious tone that there's a terrifying demon hidden in the middle of the forest. Demian finds the story ridiculous, but the veteran guarantees that it was no ordinary forest creature. The youth shares that he saw a terrible orc possessed by a demon beating a steel wolf to absolute death. He clenches his fists in anger, remembering that they needed to abandon the area due to the extreme danger there. The fellow reveals that if it weren't for this terrible creature, his beloved unit would never be destroyed. Demian scratches his head thoughtfully, finding the information very confusing and difficult to organize right now. He concludes that the best choice is to go as a porter to check out the real situation with his own eyes. The experienced captain leads the group and asks if all the combatants have organized their provisions. Commander dictates the safety rules, warning them to avoid the maximum danger routes as much as possible. He turns sideways, ordering that each soldier's highest priority be to return alive from the mission. The marching order is given, and the young Proto thinks that he will finally begin his first expedition. With a focused and confident look, he prepares to face his true debut on the battlefield. Upon arriving at the forest, the orders are to form trios to conduct a thorough search of the surroundings. The commander personally orders that the two new recruits remain very close to him on the patrol. The protagonist enters the boundaries of the forbidden forest, finding the scenery identical to any other woods. Suddenly, the boy's expression changes as he feels a heavy pressure similar to that of a real war field. With his massive combat experience, he feels his survival instincts alert to the maximum. He grips his spear with full force, having absolute certainty that the area is extremely dangerous. Suddenly, a sharp sound cuts through the forest air, making the patrol group stop immediately. Commander runs hurriedly in the direction of the noise. Wondering if the scouts finally found the target, one of the soldiers spots the leader arriving and shouts, desperately warning him to go to that spot. The scene before everyone is shocking, with broken bodies scattered across the dirt ground in a brutal manner. They examine the weapons left on the ground and conclude that the victims were too terrified to fight. The military leader analyzes the massive tree trunks split down the middle. Shocked by such destruction, Aaron asks if the creature might be a giant bear, but the commander asserts that no bear from around here would do that. The soldier then suggests that the attack was by an ogre, but the military chief dismisses the possibility. Demian steps away silently, analyzing the surroundings with great suspicion upon noticing something strange. The boy advances into the woods and finds the carcass of a massive red bear lying lifeless in the vegetation. He observes the deep claw marks and deduces that the attacker's paws were truly gigantic. The youth calls the commander and points to the wounds, explaining that clue explains all the carnage. The leader is very impressed by his reasoning and asks where a mere rookie learned that Demian lies, saying his father was a hunter and that he learned a lot listening to his old stories in the past. Kyle gets confused and almost unmasks his friend, remembering that he had said his father was an imperial soldier. The protagonist flashes a deadly look at his giant friend, who immediately shuts up out of sheer fear. The military chief calls off the day's searches and orders the respectful recovery of the local victims' bodies. The protagonist agrees with the retreat, aware that pressing on without information about the enemy would be pure suicide. The fellow smiles and acknowledges that the superior can be rigid, but proves to be an excellent strategic leader. The leader hurries the soldiers, telling everyone to move quickly to get out of that dark forest at once. Suddenly, Demian hears a terrifying noise coming from the sky and widens his eyes in a complete state of panic. He shouts with all his might, warning his companions to take great care regarding the danger. A gigantic boulder plummets violently, striking the soldiers and generating a deafening crash. The soldiers cry out in pain under the weight of the rock. Not understanding where that massive stone projectile came from, the protagonist shouts, calling his strong friend Kyle to act at once and help save the victims there. The giant uses all his incredible physical strength to hold the massive rock and ease the weight on the injured. Demian also helps, channeling his powerful purple mana to push the massive boulder with total fury. With the combined effort of the two friends, the heavy rock begins to shift slowly, saving the soldier. The other soldiers run desperately and pull their injured comrade out of that stone trap. The injured fellow is rescued, groaning heavily in pain while his body is dragged in a rush far from the danger. The chief despairs over the fellow's critical state, and Demian approaches, handing over a medicinal plant. He tells the fellow to chew the herb hard to extract the juice that will help relieve his terrible pain. The commander notices the plant and warns, it is a poisonous herb if consumed without treatment. The youth explains that the seeds he brought neutralize the toxin and tells the injured fellow to chew very fast. The military leader watches the scene totally perplexed. Wondering how a boy knows a secret like that, the boy warns his superior that they need to retreat right away. Since the stone didn't fall on its own and the beast is nearby, a colossal crash makes the ground shake heavily, leaving both warriors in a complete state of shock. A monstrous creature with glowing red eyes emerges from the shadows, frightening everyone with its presence. The warriors shrink back, trembling, and admit music. They never seen a black bear of such colossal proportions in their lives. The experienced commander recovers his posture quickly and shouts, ordering immediate combat preparation. The soldiers brandish their spears and swords. Trying desperately to form a solid line of defense, the enraged beast roars intensely and leaps at an absurd speed directly against the group's formation. Someone shouts desperately for everyone to dodge the brutal swipe of the massive and dark predator's claws. The leader orders to protect the injured in the rear and tells them to focus all initial attacks on the bear's leads. A robust soldier brandishes his large battle axe and advances. Disposed to deliver a heavy impact, he lets out a fierce war cry while rotating the weapon to apply a blow with maximum physical force. The axe hits the monster squarely, causing a deep cut in the hide and spreading a lot of blood in the woods. The warrior stands amazed upon realizing that his best attack capable of slicing an orc barely hurt the beast's hide. The commander runs desperately to Helson's rescue, shouting for his comrade to maintain total focus there. Massive corrupted black bear delivered a powerful claw swipe against the group. The brutal attack hits the front lines squarely, making the strong warrior cry out amidst the terrible impact. The body of the experienced combatant is thrown with violence and rolls without strength across the grass of the battlefield. The dark beast with red eyes glows intensely and approaches the yielded opponent with heavy steps. The monster raises its gigantic paw, armed with sharp claws, ready to apply a fatal finishing blow. Suddenly, Commander Taron appears swiftly, blocking the charge with his sword and cursing the enraged beast. The military leader focuses his gaze on the beast, swearing he won't let it escape alive. After seeing his 3 allies fall, he shouts with all his energy. Motivating the allied forces to keep attacking the monster without any respite, he commands the total ambush, ordering all men to attack repeatedly until managing to pierce the thick hide. An experienced veteran extends his arm, preventing Demian's approach and telling the rookies to stay back. The military leader shouts, calling for Dionel, and the young warrior promptly responds. Advancing with his massive weapon, Diana applies a devastating blow, cutting the creature's hind leg and spreading a lot of blood across the grass. The corrupted black bear lets out a howl of pure agony. Upon feeling the severity of that deep wound in its leg, the beast finally drops to its knees on the grass, giving the commander the ideal opportunity to carry out the final attack. The captain points his shiny blade directly at the beast's eyes. Announcing that that will be its end, Demian watches the scene and widens his eyes upon suddenly noticing a strong man of fluctuation coming from the captain. The leader channels all his bright mystic energy and leaps, applying a fatal blow to end the terrible monster. The soldiers celebrate the victory and begin to kick the body of the defeated monster with a lot of anger and relief. The commander analyzes the bear's coat thoughtfully, without having the slightest idea where such a bizarre beast arose from. He touches the strange dark patches on the carcass. Realizing that anomaly hides something very dangerous, a warrior approaches worriedly and asks if the black patches might be contagious like a plague. Demian stares at the wounds on the beast's body. Mentally confirming that is the dread demon corruption, the youth reflects that only one single explanation exists in the world for the emergence of such a corrupted creature. The boy thinks tensely that the absolute priority now must be to find the place of origin of that monster shortly. The commander orders Aaron to watch the area and tells Brent to remove the beast's hide and manufacture excellent armor. Demi interrupts the order firmly, warning that they should not use that creature's hide under any circumstances. The commander turns around surprised and asks the reason for the rookie to make such a serious warning before the entire garrison. The military leader focuses his gaze on Demian. Realizing that the youth indeed hides some very important knowledge, he changes the order, telling them to leave the carcass there to return to the base, and calls for the recruit in a mysterious way. The commander orders the boy to follow him right away, while the entire platoon begins the rapid return through the forest. Back in the office, the captain tells the youth to sit in the chair, and the boy obeys in a respectful manner. The commander asks with seriousness if Demian knows anything about the dark-spotted creature of the forest. The boy answers calmly, saying he believes that monster from earlier was corrupted by demon energy. The official is startled by the revelation, questioning if this would be the terrible mystic energy used by dark mages. He purrs tensely over forbidden dark magic, wondering if malicious mages are indeed acting in the forest. Demian explains that there are no certainties, but that it could be either a mage or some abominable creature. This demon energy is borrowed from malicious entities, music, and prolonged contact with it causes a horrible end. He recalls that the Bronze Elia forest hid a corrupted mystic stone, but finds it strange that it appeared early. In the past, the existence of that cursed gem was only revealed after a great tragedy that shook the entire empire. The youth widens his eyes as he suspects that these recent incidents are actually just the beginning of it all. The malicious aura grows with time, corrupting the beasts, and he decides to destroy the gem before it gets powerful. The captain asks suspiciously how he knows so much, and Demian repeats the lie, saying he heard it all from his father. The military chief demonstrates a lot of interest in the subject, and asks to hear more details about his father's experience. Faced with the troops' despair for any type of information, Demian agrees to tell one more made-up story. The next morning, the sunlight shines over the camp. While the recruits begin to wake up in the dormitories, Kyle wakes up yawning and complains of muscle pains, saying that the previous day's patrol left him very exhausted. Suddenly, a soldier opens the room door with a thud. Bringing an important urgent announcement for the whole team, he reveals with astonishment that the dangerous Bronze Elia forest was officially closed off by orders from the High Command. The soldiers celebrate the news happily, because now they will have plenty of free time to rest and treat their injuries. The big fellow notices Demian's serious expression, and questions curiously the reason for his friend not celebrating too. The protagonist hides his face and agrees that the time off is good, but gets tense thinking about the danger of delaying the mission. The fellow walks down the corridor, and suddenly spots some men in imposing armor walking just ahead of him. A recruit observes the guards pass by in a haughty manner, wondering what that garrison is doing at his base. The arrogant official from the Imperial garrison settles with crossed arms in the main chair of the command room. Commander Taron enters his own office and asks the visitor what motivated that sudden arrival. The man explains that the temple agreed to cooperate after they felt a strong malicious presence coming from that dead bear. The captain stands thoughtful, noting shocked that the deductions made by the rookie Demian were totally correct. The official warns that nothing is definitive and reveals the plan to send a cleric for a large joint search in the area. The visitor adds it due to the danger. He wishes to take the soldier who possesses knowledge about dark magic. Taron tries to protect the boy, saying he is just a rookie, but the man counters that it was he who found the clues. The commander knows he cannot refuse the demand under the serious risk of suffering severe punishments from his superiors. With a tense expression, he orders Aaron to summon Demian immediately. Meanwhile, Demian already senses that another complication is approaching. As he walks alone through the fortress that evening, he wonders how long he can maintain the commander's trust before eventually revealing the truth. The scene opens on the formidable walls of a towering military fortress, the undeniable aura of the kingdom's glory hanging heavy in the air. The view quickly shifts inside as Demian, a young red-haired recruit, casually strides into the imposing command center. His simple unarmored clothing instantly draws the bewildered stares of the heavily armed guards standing watch. Approaching the massive wooden desk, Demian stands face to face with the grizzled battle-card base commander. The veteran officer grimly begins to outline a new daunting assignment, heavily emphasizing that the rookie has every right to completely refuse the dangerous call. But without a single second of hesitation, Demian fiercely volunteers. Beneath his eager exterior, a sharp, calculating glint flashes in his eyes. He secretly knows that taking this risky deployment is his absolute best chance to track down a specific terrifying beast tainted by foul demonic energy. Visibly stunned by the boy's fearless, almost unnatural enthusiasm, the veteran commander yields, agreeing to set the official schedule and dismissing the recruit. The scene cuts to the dusty grounds just outside the massive fortress gates. Still deeply unsettled by the boy's reckless confidence, the commander presses him one last time, urgently offering a protective escort of seasoned senior squad members for the journey, flashing a chillingly calm, arrogant smile. Demian flatly rejects the backup. Internally, he coldly calculates that dragging slow veterans along would only ruin his chances of a lightning-fast escape if the mission suddenly goes to hell. With a heavy, exasperated sigh, the veteran's expression darkens as he delivers a stern, ironclad command. Under no circumstances is the rookie permitted to engage in actual combat. Feigning total innocence, Damien lightly brushes off the grave warning. He playfully promises to merely gather some medicinal herbs for the squad and return in one piece before confidently marching off toward the treacherous wilds. Left behind in the dust, the dumbfounded commander and his lieutenant can only watch the boys retreating back, quietly muttering in sheer disbelief at the arrival of such an insanely unpredictable anomaly. The scene instantly shifts to the eerie mist-shrouded perimeter of the Bronerian forest. A massive, heavily armed battalion marches deep into the treacherous woods, an overwhelmingly impressive lineup assembled specifically to hunt down a forbidden dark mage. Leading the vanguard are the stern, batley-hardened Errol Guard, Captain Vaisal, and the enigmatic Adelant Temple Priest Claire. The tense, quiet march is abruptly shattered when Captain Vassal spots the red-haired rookie Damien, attempting to throw his weight around. The veteran captain fiercely confronts the boy, expecting immediate subservience, but Damien coldly shuts him down. With a mocking smirk, the young soldier utterly dismisses the veteran's authority, callously stating that since they belong to completely different military units, the captain's rank is utterly meaningless. Leaving the absolutely enraged and dumbfounded captain sputtering in the dirt, Damien strides forward with a terrifyingly casual arrogance. Watching the bizarre, disrespectful exchange unfold, Priest Claire's attention is sharply drawn to the fearless recruit. When the fuming captain reveals that this mere boy was the very first person to raise the alarm about demonic energy in the region, Claire's glowing golden eyes narrow with intense piercing scrutiny. Gliding over to the young soldier, the holy priest practically corners him, silently demanding an explanation for his unnatural, highly suspicious knowledge of the dark arts. For a split second, a flash of calculating caution crosses Damien's face as he internally wonders if the perceptive priest has already seen right through his facade. Quickly masking his guard, Damien confidently spins a flawless narrative. He calmly attributes his dark knowledge to the teachings of his late father, effortlessly diffusing her suspicion. Pushing the story forward, he vividly recounts the visceral horror of inspecting a mangled monster corpse alongside the high priest. Drawing on his absolute knowledge of the local wildlife, Damien paints a terrifying, vivid picture of a beast completely alien to the forest, a monstrous shadowy predator violently corrupted by foul demonic energy, its flesh ruined by rotting black spots and its eyes burning with a murderous, unnatural crimson light. The priest accepts the young soldier's explanation about his late father, wrapping up her questioning with a polite nod. With the tension momentarily past, Captain Vessel loudly commands the entire unit to push deeper into the dark forest, ordering everyone to stay on high alert for anything out of the ordinary. As the heavy footsteps of the marching soldiers echo through the woods, Damien quietly slips to the edge of the formation. He figures the regular troops can handle the basic scouting, but he knows he needs to move further in to intercept his true target. Suddenly, a guard spots Diane crouching in the thick brush and panics, shouting out to the others that a monster might be lurking. Weapons are drawn, but the panic instantly turns to annoyance when they realize Damien is just happily digging up a rare manner restoring root. Feeling completely foolish, the embarrassed guards furiously yell at the rookie, asking if he thinks he is on a forest picnic. Damien's innocent act immediately drops. He shoots the shouting guard, a cold, dead-eyed glare, chillingly warning the man that running his mouth will lead to an early grave. He calmly reminds the angry soldiers that searching is their job, not his. When the guard complains about being startled, Damien mercilessly mocks their cowardly reactions. He points out that if a rustling bush is enough to make them shake in fear, their pathetic skill level is dragging the entire guard unit's reputation through the mud. Before the furious guard can snap back, Captain Vel steps right into the middle of the argument to shut it down. He strictly scolds Damien for his impulsive behavior, warning the boy not to do anything else that might ruin the search operation. Playing the part of a cooperative recruit, Damien lightly agrees to stay within the designated area. With a heavy, exhausted sigh, the captain turns away from the head-inducing rookie and orders his men to drop their heavy gear to begin a thorough sweep of the grounds. The quiet search is suddenly shattered when the dense bushes violently rustle. A terrifying swarm of glowing red eyes pierces through the dark foliage, and the frantic call to prepare for battle rings out across the unit as a massive horde of monsters breaks from the tree. At first glance, the veteran guards smugly shrug off the ambush. Seeing only a standard pack of wild orcs, they confidently draw their weapons, expecting a quick and easy slaughter. But their arrogant smiles instantly vanish the second they get a closer look. One of the soldiers freezes in pure horror as he spots the sickly black marks and burning crimson eyes covering the beasts. The horrifying truth sets in. These are no ordinary monsters, but savage orcs completely warped by foul demonic energy. With a deafening roar, a massive corrupted beast launches itself at the front line. Moving with a terrifying unnatural speed, the monster easily closes the gap before anyone can react. A heavy blade violently swings down toward the paralyzed guard. The others scream for him to fall back, but it is already too late. The terrified soldier completely freezes, bracing for a brutal death as he realizes the strike is simply too fast to dodge, but the deadly blow never lands. A deafening metallic clash echoes through the forest as the heavy attack is perfectly deflected. Snapping out of his shock, the trembling guard looks up to see the red-haired rookie Damien firmly planted in a flawless defensive stance. Gripping his spear, Damon fiercely scolds the frozen soldier to get a grip. With a sharp, glowing aura flaring around him, the young recruit coldly asks the terrified veteran just how much further he plans to drag their unit's proud reputation into the mud. The scene opens in a dense clearing as a disciplined squad of soldiers rapidly scrambles into a defensive V formation to intercept an incoming threat. Facing the impending ambush, the seasoned captain vessel swiftly organizes his ranks, explicitly assigning a trio of his men to form a tight protective guard around the white-robed priestess, Claire. Observing the organized chaos from the sidelines, Damien quietly acknowledges Vessel's veteran composure and deep field experience. The tension breaks violently as a horde of massive, red-eyed orcs crashes heavily into the human front line. The sheer brute strength of the monsters immediately overwhelms the defenders, knocking soldiers backward and leaving Claire dangerously exposed. Provoked into a feral frenzy by the natural toxicity of her holy presence, the ferocious orcs lock their sights solely on the priestess and charge murderously toward her. With death bearing down on her, Claire desperately clasps her hands in deep prayer, squeezing her eyes shut as she summons her magic. A blinding, radiant explosion of divine power erupts from her body, washing over the battlefield and severely agonizing the encroaching monsters. Yet, despite the holy intervention, Damien watches the grim reality unfold. The defensive line is crumbling, and the soldiers will inevitably be slaughtered if the battle continues at this pace. Though he was explicitly ordered by Vessel to stay entirely out of the fight, Damien realizes he has absolutely no choice but to break protocol. Gripping his weapon tightly, Damien blasts forward, his body trailing a fierce, crackling purple aura as he lunges high into the air above the chaotic clash. Descending with blinding speed, he executes a devastating fluid strike that instantly slashes through the necks of two towering orcs simultaneously. The massive beasts crash lifelessly to the forest floor, leaving a battered soldier staring in absolute, stunned, and overwhelming display of lethal force. Landing from his lethal strike, Damien locks eyes with the stunned soldier guarding the priestess and issues a sharp command for him to abandon his post and reinforce the front line. Though momentarily hesitant, the soldier quickly bows to Damien's fierce authority and sprints back into the fray, leaving the young spearman to assume the role of Claire's sole protector. Turning his attention to the priestess, Damien finds Claire completely paralyzed by terror, her eyes blown wide and her body trembling violently under the weight of the gruesome slaughter unfolding around her. Realizing she is entirely consumed by shell shock and that her earlier burst of magic was merely a blind panic response, Damien roughly grabs her by the shoulders, giving her a sharp grounding shake to snap her back to reality. Forcing her to look past her fear, he points directly into the heart of the chaotic melee where the soldiers are being pushed to their absolute limits, firmly instructing her to channel every ounce of her divine power and unleash it upon the battlefield. Swallowing her terror, Claire nods resolutely and drops to her knees, tightly gripping her holy staff to focus her magic. As she plunges into deep, desperate prayer, a blistering ring of divine fire erupts from the earth around her. The sheer magnitude of the magic explodes outward in a colossal, blinding starburst of holy light, leaving Damien watching in absolute astonishment as he realizes he had severely underestimated her. This is not ordinary magic, but the overwhelming, devastating power of a high priest. The purifying light crashes over the horde of orcs like a tidal wave, blinding the monsters and sending them into agonizing, helpless fits of pain. Recognizing the miraculous opening, the battered soldiers immediately rally and launch a brutal, roaring counteroffensive, ruthlessly hacking through the incapacitated beasts and turning the tide of the skirmish in an instant. The gruesome thud of a severed orc head rolling to a halt on the bloody grass finally signals the end of the brutal skirmish. The surviving soldiers, heavily battered and gasping for air, stand amidst carnage in stunned relief. Wiping the grime and sweat from his exhausted face, Captain Vassal immediately shifts his focus to the grim reality of the aftermath, ordering a swift count of their casualties. A heavy, mournful silence falls over the veteran commander as he learns that 8 of his men have perished, prompting him to order the careful, solemn retrieval of their bodies so no one is left behind in the dirt. Seeking tactical guidance, Vassal approaches Claire, questioning if they need to press deeper into the treacherous woods to root out the source. The priestess firmly rejects the idea. Crouching beside the massive corpse of a slain beast, she examines the unnatural aura seeping from its flesh. She chillingly reveals that the creatures were entirely corrupted by demonic energy, indicating the forest itself is heavily tainted and a far more sinister, unimaginable threat is brewing in its darkest depths. Realizing the sheer scale of the danger, Vassal declares the absolute necessity to fall back, formally report the demonic presence, and assemble a massive official subjugation force. Overhearing the grim tactical shift, Damien cannot hide a sharp, knowing smirk. His mind immediately races with anticipation, calculating that a large-scale holy crusade against demonic forces will inevitably place his own Neocalit's unit right at the brutal vanguard of the coming war. His internal scheming is briefly interrupted when the soldier he had rescued earlier approaches, offering deep trembling gratitude for saving his life. Keeping a low profile, the young spearman humbly brushes off the praise, acting as though his lethal intervention was nothing more than a passing reflex. With the immediate threat neutralized, the young spearman kneels quietly in the blood-stained grass, meticulously gathering handfuls of fresh green herbs and packing them into his sack, internally lamenting the immense effort it took to harvest them for his unit. Securing his heavy bag, Damien approaches his veteran captain, interrupting the commander's thoughts. He bluntly demands that Vassal take action to absolutely crush the local Urkel herbalists. The seasoned commander is left staring in utter bewilderment at the sudden bizarre request. Without missing a beat, Damien passionately vents his frustrations, explaining that the city's merchants are shamelessly extorting people by charging 5 times the normal rate for medical supplies, completely draining his hard-earned, hazard pay in the process. Forcefully shoving the heavy sack of gathered herbs directly into Vassal's chest, the young spearman insists the captain use the freshly picked stash to treat their wounded soldiers to bypass the outrageous costs. Captain Vassal's initial shock quickly melts into deep, genuine gratitude as he looks at the young warrior, solemnly thanking him for the life-saving contribution. Immediately pivoting back to his grim duties, Vassal raises his voice over the clearing, bellowing the final orders to initiate a full retreat and commanding his surviving men to painstakingly gather the bodies and tend to the injured. As the battered squad scrambles to carry out the withdrawal, Damien casually walks away from the carnage, spear in hand. Watching his retreating figure, Claire remains entirely silent, but a soft, warm smile finally breaks through the lingering terror on her veiled face. Her previous shock completely replaced by a profound, gentle intrigue.